One of the greatest forms of support we got last year at the West Virginia POWER Grantee Summit.
The West Virginia Community Development Hub is proud to present the West Virginia POWER Grantee Summit. Thank you for joining us.
Our advice to coalitions interested in pursuing the POWER money is don't be afraid to aim high.
A strong and consistent and deliberate effort.
Join us virtually at this year's event. Attendees will hear from local, regional, and national speakers who will share their perspectives and advice on the Appalachian Regional Commission's POWER funding opportunity, including a keynote with ARC co-chair Gail Manchin.
Create a community around your project.
This event is a chance to celebrate and be inspired by innovative projects and to learn strategies and best practices to pursue federal funding in the coming year.
You are applying to do work that you know in your heart really matters.
Welcome to the West Virginia POWER Grantee Summit, starting now.
Good morning. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Welcome, as we said, to the West Virginia Community Development Hub's 2021 West Virginia POWER Grantee Summit. I'm Stephanie Tyree, Executive Director of the West Virginia Community Development Hub, and I'm going to be your MC for today's event. This is the Hub's fifth year of hosting these annual events for our West Virginia POWER grantees and state leaders interested in POWER funding, and our second time hosting it as an online event. Today, we're here to honor past and current West Virginia POWER grantees, learn from experts in the field, and connect for resources to help us continue to drive ARC funding to transformational community economic development projects in West Virginia. Today, you're going to hear from a keynote session with federal co-chair Gail Manchin and two new POWER grantees. We'll have three separate panels featuring nearly 20 speakers sharing about how to build strong POWER projects, collaborations, and applications. And we will premiere 3 POWER Talk documentary video shorts. For those of you who are thinking about applying for 2022 POWER funding, the Hub provides coaching support for applicants applying for funding each year, particularly for those of you who have not applied before or for groups who are thinking about resubmitting an application that wasn't previously awarded. The site to sign up for those coaching sessions will go live in mid-January, and I'll provide a little more information about what that coaching looks like towards the end of today's event. Everyone who's registered for today's event will receive an email with information about that coaching resource when it goes live. So we've got a packed schedule today. We're squeezing 4 panels and 3 video premieres into 3 hours, and I have the job of keeping us on time and on task. So let's get into it. We are going to kick it off with a keynote session with the Appalachian Regional Commission's federal co-chair, Mrs. Gail Manchin. As many of you know, Mrs. Manchin is the first federal co-chair from West Virginia, and she has absolutely hit the ground running since her appointment. We're thrilled to have her join us today at our event for West Virginia POWER grantees, partners, and potential future applicants. Mrs. Manchin, thank you for joining us today.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
It's so great to be with you, and what an exciting day. And thank you, Stephanie, and to everyone in the West Virginia Community Development Hub for having me here today as we begin another exciting year. And as most of you probably know, this was our largest POWER grant package since its inception in 2015, and we awarded more than $46 million. So we're very excited about these meaningful POWER grants that really across West Virginia and across Appalachia can really result in transformative changes throughout our region. So to those of you that this is not your first grant, congratulations for coming back and winning again. And for those of you that are just starting on your POWER journey, I wish you luck. And I encourage you to use this opportunity to learn and connect. Please stay connected with these other POWER grantees, with other Appalachian leaders that are working diligently throughout Appalachia Stephanie knows that one of my mottos throughout my short tenure here has been that we need to work more together. We need to cross county lines. We need to cross state lines. We need to know that there's power in numbers. There's power in what we can do if we are building our opportunities together, and that we lift up the entire Appalachian region. So it's just a joy to be here today to share with you and see this opportunity for you all to connect and get to know one another. And the projects that have been out there this year, we were so excited about the energy and the entrepreneurial spirit and the vision that were exhibited through our Power grants this year. You know, it's as Appalachians, well, and as West Virginians, certainly, we help our neighbors, and we know that it is one another, that we can rely on each other for this camaraderie, for insight, and for helping us building communities better, to renovate, to reinvigorate, to reinvent. I have long believed that the two greatest assets in our region are the beauty of our land and certainly the beauty and resourcefulness of our people. And I believe that certainly the people gathered here today certainly exemplify all of those virtues of resourcefulness and resiliency. Appalachians, the whole Appalachian region needs leaders like you to bring these forward-thinking plans to life when we look toward revitalizing our coal-impacted communities. It's not about, we've got to forget about where we've been. It's not even about where we are right now. It's where can we go in the future together? Where do we want to be 5 years from now, 10 years from now? So I am excited to see the exciting impact that our previous Power grants have had, certainly our new grantees. I'm very excited to see the outcomes and what it will really do in terms of a great effect on our coal impacted communities. Stephanie, it's just great to be here, great to be part of not only the celebration, but also the beginning of the work. Because we know that getting the grant, we can all say yay, but then we know that's when the really hard work begins. So again, Stephanie, thank you for asking me to share this day with you. And I'm going to try to help you keep on schedule.
Thank you. Well, thanks for those great remarks. And we know that working together is what Power is all about. So that all makes sense to us, and it's what we're trying to do here. We're excited to do a slightly different approach with our keynote session this morning with Mrs. Manchin, and we are providing some time for her to have a dynamic conversation with two new 2022 Power grantees about their projects and their leadership in the state. They got their award in 2021 and are starting it heading into the coming year. So to participate in this discussion, I'd like to welcome to the stage Dave Clark, Executive Director of Woodlands Development Group and Woodlands Community Lenders, who received a broadband Power grant this year, and Victoria Stansberry, Blueprint Community Coordinator with the Lewis County Commission, who received a TA Planning Power grant for a trail development project this year. Hey, Dave and Victoria, and I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Manchin for your discussion.
Okay, thank you. Well, good morning, Victoria and Dave. Glad to have this opportunity to chat with you. So, Victoria, I know that you were just hired recently to be the Lewis County Blueprint Communities Coordinator, and you sort of immediately began developing an application for Power funding. What motivated you to go after this funding, and what did you learn by going through the application?
So really, it just so happened that when I started my new role, this Power opportunity was one of the first things that came across my desk. And I just thought to myself, this is it. This is why I'm here. This is why I was hired to progress, to move our strategic plans forward and to find funding. And so I was unfamiliar with ARC at the beginning and with the POWER initiative in particular. But really, the more I learned about ARC and POWER and what they were trying to accomplish, the more excited and resolved I became that Lewis County needed to have an application in. And at that time, really, I knew so little. I was new to this world. I said, I just have to try. I just have to learn what the process looks like and see what it's like. As far as things that I learned and what might be good advice, as a first-time grantee, all of what I'm thinking of is all the little things that I did that kept me sane and organized, on track, and really excited for the project. And one of the main thing I would say is ARC puts out a really a lot of really great materials, a lot of really great support materials, outlines, and guides. And I just read through those and made sure that I had an idea of what ARC was trying to achieve and what a good partnership looked like to them. Additionally, aside from the ARC materials, there are also state documents that are specific to each state. And I reviewed those and just got an idea of how our project would fit into what ARC was trying to achieve and what West Virginia was trying to achieve.
Well, that's great, Victoria. And as you know from going through the material, that the POWER grants are all about impact. So tell us a little bit about what you hope the impact of the POWER grant will be in your area.
So our grant, our POWER project, is to work on creating a central guiding document, this feasibility study, that is going to look at the development of a greenway, not only through Lewis County, but also Harrison County to the north and Braxton County to the south. We want to be looking at this regional approach and taking advantage of assets that they have, and also trail building initiatives and works that are already happening there. So we hope to strengthen what's already being done in those neighboring counties, honestly, and to play off of them, and also to engage our community in a deeper way. So this trail initiative was led by the community. This is a desire that we heard. People in Lewis County wanted a trail. And so this for us is a step toward that, toward listening to what the community wants and showing them that together this is something that we can do, and just getting the community excited, involved, and increasing our knowledge in this area for sure, because all of us on the grant team, we are not trail gurus. We have not been deeply embedded in this before. So taking advantage of all the knowledge that comes with doing this feasibility study, all the new skills that we're learning, and new partnerships that are being formed. So it's really a considerable opportunity for us, and we are just really excited and dedicated to making the most of it.
Well, you know, I love the fact that you are crossing your county lines and working with counties beside of you, and we hope that continues to build, that they keep going out even further to other counties, because that truly is. You learn from one another, you share with one another. And so in thinking about sharing and those kind of terms, how do you think ARC can be a good partner with you and help support you through your work?
So as I mentioned, we're all new to this, and I'm definitely new to the development world. So ARC is providing us with the very much needed capital, the support that we need from the monetary side to do this, quite obviously, right? But in addition with that, we now have a renewed sense of authority to our project, a renewed sense of authenticity and excitement that's growing around it. So as we start our all of the things that we had planned out in the application, right? That's one of the great things about this long application, is that it takes so much time, but once you get the grant, you think, oh wow, look, I have so many things planned out. I have partners in place already. So really the biggest thing is getting the opportunity to go through and do all of that work that we planned so hard for, to take advantage of all of those partnerships that we formed, to go back and be able to tell people, okay, this is it. We got it. Let's get started. And that really is the most exciting part, I think, and what we're really looking forward to getting out of being an ARC Power grantee.
Well, Victoria, thank you. I certainly see a lot of energy and excitement, and I just want you to know that we are so happy for you, and know that we are a partner in the funding, but we are always a partner and always there to support you in what you're doing. So we're not there for the short term, we're there for the long term. So thank you, Victoria, and good luck to you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
So Dave, you've been a leader in rural community development in West Virginia for many years, and you have been a previous POWER recipient through Woodlands lending arm, Woodlands Community Lenders. So your POWER funded grant this year is a broadband development project, which, as we all know, is critically needed for much of our rural regions. But tell me, why did you seek the ARC funding for this particular project?
Sure. Well, good morning, Ms. Manchin. And I'll say that was great to hear. I hadn't heard about Victoria's project just down the road in Lewis County. That's really exciting to hear about. I'll be psyched to hear more about how that comes along. But yeah, so broadband is a new endeavor for us at Woodlands. As you said, I think everybody acknowledges now that it's just critical infrastructure for everything. Economic development, healthcare, education, everything we need. And I should say too that we came into this as part of a cohort led by our friends at Generation West Virginia. And we all agree that as critical infrastructure, we really needed to diversify and expand our approaches to broadband deployment in the state. I think we all know that kind of traditional market-based approaches don't work well necessarily in rural West Virginia. So we needed to come up with a new way of doing it. And this ARC gave us the flexibility to be able to approach this as a nonprofit. One of the key pieces for us and for our communities is that this be an open access internet line, that any company can come in and use it. And the infrastructure will be owned by Woodlands as a local nonprofit, not by a private company. And that was really important to us. So this will get service into a very rural part of our service area. We focus really just on Randolph, Barber, and Tucker counties in northern West Virginia, areas that would otherwise really not get served, or if they are going to get served, it's going to be way down the line.
Well, certainly everything that you've talked about, Dave, fits right into the ARC POWER grant, things that we're looking for when these grants are reviewed and evaluated. So, and you're absolutely right, that funding going into broadband is a critical element if we are going to grow and develop. So I do know that your previous project was an entrepreneurship, small business financing project. So let's think about now, how do you see broadband, entrepreneurship, small business development? How do you see all that working together as a part of community development and growth?
Sure. So, well, at least for Woodlands, I'll say, we made the conscious decision a few years ago that as a community development organization, kind of instead of focusing on one or two products that we could deliver well and expand out geographically, we really decided we're going to focus in on our 3 counties. And we're going to do whatever it takes to help further the economic and community development goals of those communities in the 3 counties. And so that has led to housing development and downtown redevelopment, now broadband. And then a few years ago, we decided, after getting input from our local economic development authorities and chambers of commerce and local businesses, we decided to create a partner organization, a community development financial institution, or a CDFI, to provide financing, alternative financing to small businesses, startup businesses and growing small businesses in the region. So that first grant was really key for us, I'll say, in that it helped us capitalize a loan pool. So with the initial grant from ARC Power Funds, we were able to reach out to our local community banks, and they saw the value in what we were doing, and we were helping businesses that they couldn't necessarily help through their traditional lending model. So this helped us capitalize a loan pool. So we were able to put together $1 million in loan funds that we've deployed several years ago now. We've been able to build on those and get more loan funds in to help more businesses start up. And I'll say for us too, it was really key in that it really changed the whole conversation with our local banks. So getting that funding in, it allowed us to not just capitalize the loan pool, but now we work with them on tax credit investments, on other real estate deals. And so they, probably most of our referrals for our small business lending now come from those local banks. So that was a key piece of funding that really helped launch us, I'd say.
Well, as an old hand on power grants, since you've had more than one now, a couple of things that you talk about, building these partnerships with the people around you, other businesses, that's a key point in all of our grant proposals as we ask people to build these relationships with their community and the people in their community. And obviously that's something that you have done. Is there anything else that you see that ARC could be doing or that in a way to help you as you move forward?
Well, I would say, I think we need to continue to look at ways of building our collective capacity across the state to deliver projects like this, whether it's on housing or downtown redevelopment or infrastructure. I think the traditional approaches, as I said earlier, don't always fit well. And the tools we have available to us weren't really designed for rural West Virginia a lot of times. So we have to be really creative in how we think and apply those tools. And a lot of times it's risky. Not just necessarily risk of failure, but in a lot of the cases, we have actual financial skin in the game. And so these are risky projects for us. And so I think, as you said earlier, staying connected, more forums like this where we can learn from our peers, where we can better understand how other people are approaching this. That reduces our risk and makes us feel better about it for sure. And also just reminds us that we're not going it alone. There are other folks that are there working beside us and with us on this.
Well, Dave, you're absolutely right. And thank you so much. And congratulations to you on your new endeavor and good luck to you. And I know that Stephanie is, we're preaching to the choir with her. She knows the importance of bringing people together and bringing the grantees together. But just like you mentioned that you didn't know about Victoria's grant, these types of forums and summits allows people to learn about what else is going on around the state. And you're right, we do need to do more of that, and we need to stay connected. And Stephanie knows that we engaged in a big endeavor of 6 states writing a proposal together. And so I'm hoping that we will be able sometime in the near future to have a forum where we have power grantees from the states around us, that we can all begin to share these ideas and how we can move forward together to better the entire region so that we all gain from it. But I'm so happy for you, Dave, and for Victoria and for all of our grantees out there. And Stephanie, it's back to you with a lot of kudos for having this summit today.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Manchin. And thank you, Dave and Victoria, for joining us this morning. It's really been inspiring and exciting to be working with you, Mrs. Manchin, since you've come into your position, and just seeing the vision that you have, both for working together within the state, working across county lines, and working across state lines too, and thinking about how we can leverage partnerships across the region. I think there's a lot of excitement for that. And part of what I've loved is your suggestion of having this dynamic conversation this morning. Mrs. Manchin, when we asked her to speak, she came to us and she said, yeah, I can speak, but I'd rather have a conversation than just talking at everyone. And so the opportunity to feature two new grantees, but one who is brand new in Victoria and one who has some experience but is leaning into a new area of work like Dave is doing is really a great way to launch our day. So thank you again to all of you for speaking, and thanks for helping us stay on time this morning. I appreciate that. So I'm going to move us straight into our first panel discussion of the day now. This panel is called Launching a Power Project, Strategies to Kickstart Success. And in this panel, you're going to hear from past and current power grantees about how power funding was the right source for their projects and the strategies that they found that worked for launching strong and impactful federally funded power projects. Power is a great resource, but it's also a great learning tool as we look to other federal funds that can support this type of work. So I'd like to welcome our speakers to the stage and just invite you to turn on your videos as I call your name. In our panel today, we have Jacob Hanna, Conservation Coordinator with Coalfield Development Corporation, Stephen Jones, Volunteer Project Manager with Monongalia Outdoor Volunteers, Jeff Lusk, Executive Director with Hatfield-McCoy Regional Recreation Authority, Ray Moeller, Economic Redevelopment Specialist with WVU's Northern Brownfields Assistance Center, and Ashley Shaw, Director of Marshall University's Health Core Program. And finally, our moderator, Ralph Goolsby, who is a Power Grantee coach and a state community development leader who has 37 years of experience in the West Virginia Development Office and is now retired. I will turn it over to you, Ralph, now to lead our panel.
Well, good morning, and thank you, Stephanie. Good morning, everyone. And Mrs. Manchin, it was great to hear your words, and it's really great to have you at leadership at the Appalachian Regional Commission. We have a lot to talk about today, and Stephanie has reminded us that we're going to stay on task on a couple of things. But our panel is to talk about power and to talk about some of the early stage developments of power. And I'm going to move right in and just start with Jeff. And Jeff, why don't you share with us what caused your organization to even think about applying for power?
Thank you, Ralph, and good morning. And Ms. Manchin, as Ralph said, we're so excited with your new position. You're going to be great for West Virginia and great for the whole Appalachian region. As Ralph, our project was brought about by a need in our area for lodging growth. The Hatfield-McCoy Trail system had been growing, but we've been growing at a somewhat anemic pace due to the fact that we didn't have enough lodging in our area. When we talked to the entrepreneurs that were trying to go into business, there were two common themes. One was they needed more risk capital, and the second was, oh my gosh, this is very complicated. We need some business coaching and training. They didn't know it was called coaching and training to help us get these applications together. We first looked to our SBDC, but our SBDCs are stretched really thin. They'll have a single person serving an entire region, and it's really hard for them to break off time to work with specific entrepreneurs in specific industries. So we turned to two long-term partners, Southern West Virginia Community and Technical College, the Natural Capital Investment Fund, to do a power application. It was a new program. It had just rolled out. Us and our partners attended a training at Flatwoods that was offered by the West Virginia Community Development Hub. We left there inspired and I guess empowered to make an application. We made two sister applications, one with us, one with Natural Capital Investment Fund, now Partners in Community Capital. And we're excited to say, that money was so flexible, and ARC worked with us in our application, and it was unlike anything we had ever worked with on our end. And because of the flexibility given by power, we were able to do something that in the past, there just wasn't a federal program that would have funded us to do those things. We just ended up our program this spring. We created 50 new businesses, and our Hatfield-McCoy Trail system doubled in ridership over the term of this power grant. That is largely, if not entirely, due to the fact that we received the ARC power grant. So it was just huge for us and our partners. And we can't say enough about the program, and folks that are looking to make an application, you're not going to find a better partner than the Appalachian Regional Commission.
Jeff, thanks a lot. You talk about your success, and any idea about how much money you guys have leveraged just right off the top of your head?
we raised locally dollar for dollar, almost 2 million with our with just funding to go with the ARC Power Grant from businesses, EDAs, CVBs, Natural Capital Investment Fund for the 1.5 million they got, raised another 6 million in lending money. But if you look at the investments in our community, it's tens of millions of dollars in private business financing that was leveraged, put in our community, opening up lodging businesses, restaurants. So if we had to put a number on it, I'm going to say it's probably $30 million of private investment, community investment for the two ARC grants that ourselves and Partner in Community Capital received. So the leverage was just amazing. And the jobs in our community are going to be here forever. And, if you want to talk about leverage, they're going to be here 50 years from now.
Wow. That's so impressive, Jeff. Thank you so much. Hey, Ray, why don't you share with us how ARC has provided a unique resource for your project?
Sure, and it's a pleasure to be a part of the program this morning. I echo a lot of what Jeff said. There's a lot of similarities in how their program was started along with ours. Ours was aimed at the challenge of downtown redevelopment across West Virginia. Everybody will agree, I think, that we have a target-rich environment in our state of former elegant downtowns that where a lot of the buildings are in need of redevelopment resourcing. And the tough thing, as Dave mentioned earlier, is just getting these projects off the ground and trying to bring them to fruition. And that involves the pre-development activities to make sure these buildings can accept that resourcing. The ARC funding was a team effort. Again, a similarity. Our partner was Partner in Community Capital, formerly the Natural Capital Investment Fund, and our Brownfield office were the kind of the legs on the ground, and they were the organization behind the scenes helping with the funding and managing the pre-development investment and then the loan capital behind it. We were able to affect downtown redevelopment statewide in cities large and small, very rural to some of our larger cities. It was impactful. It allowed us to build the bench depth and the outreach and partner with key resources in moving the needle in a very challenging aspect of downtown redevelopment.
Well, that's important to note. So can you share with us about the resources that might be available for pre-development costs?
Yeah, actually, the Downtown Appalachia program, we're in the final stages of that investment. So the resources that we had made available were like architectural analysis and environmental study, those costs that go into the building pre-development so that banks can feel more comfortable in investing in redevelopment activities where the buildings are historic and they may have been built in a time when code analysis was not a thing. And so we brought important resourcing to assure that the market was there, that the building could be utilized in the fashion that was proposed, and allow those and the owners and the developers to kind of take the next steps in the development process.
Yeah. Can you identify, and I guess what I'm getting at is putting that plug in for ARC and the POWER program. What other resources are out there to help support those pre-development costs?
Yeah, absolutely. And that is a challenging aspect. And again, organizations like Dave's are available to promote that. We have formed some statewide downtown redevelopment working groups to assure that we can continue the process of downtown redevelopment. The funding for those activities can be found through activities like ours. We are looking to take on the Monforest gateways and bring strategic investment in the downtowns of that area. Truly the ARC provided the funding that allowed us to kind of be flexible, like Jeff said, in bringing that investment activity. And we're looking to continue that through other programs of the EDA and related granting organizations. But it is a much needed and critical resource that can be brought to the table.
Well, thank you. Jeff, is there anything you'd like to add to that before we move on?
I'd like to add one thing, the flexibility. We had to pivot multiple times during our ARC grant, and the flexibility that ARC had in working with us and making those changes. And part of this was during COVID, were really great. And with us, we have a very non-traditional entrepreneur down here. It's folks coming out of the coal, timber, and gas industry. They require, I don't want to call it hand-holding, but it's coaching and working with more so than you'd see in a growing area. ARC understood that and worked with us because our businesses came on very slow, and most of our businesses were developed the last part of our grant, and ARC understood that, worked with us. The flexibility is probably the greatest thing about the POWER program.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that. One thing that I heard from both of you were the fact that you guys did not do this by yourselves, but you had partnerships. And what I'd like to do now is kind of move on and let's talk about partnerships. And Ashley, would you mind to share with us what's the important piece about bringing partners into the POWER process?
Sure. So thanks. I just want to say good morning to everyone, and thanks for the invitation to share a little bit about my experiences and our experiences in working with ARC POWER. In regards to partnership for me is the bread and butter of ARC POWER. Partnerships really strengthen your ability to make impact. And ARC wants to see that impact across communities. So it really has been a leveraged opportunity through POWER to be able to bridge those gaps and bridge those partners to create a greater impact. And thinking about just, writing that proposal, one of the, suggestions that I would give folks as it relates to that is to think about, assets and liabilities. Think about your organization as, okay, what strengths do we bring to the table in regards to this idea that we have? How do we fit into that mold? And then, okay, what is it that we don't have, or what is it we're not so strong in, and who can provide that resource to us? And so by thinking about things in that way, you're able to craft a proposal that becomes stronger because you're identifying what you're good at, but you're plugging in the holes so that you can create greater impact within the community. So they're really the lifeline to a project. CORE is creating opportunities for recovery employment. And it's also important to have those external partners. So you have the ones that you're presenting in the proposal. But for us, those external partners, CORE wouldn't be as successful as it has been in the community had we not engaged with partners throughout the community. And for us, that includes, treatment providers, resource agencies, and business. And without them, we're boots on ground and we're, meeting people where they are. But if we don't identify what it is that we need from each of these partners, then we're doing a disservice to the people that we serve. So it really, for us, partnership is key to making your project successful. It's about leveraging ideas, leveraging knowledge, and building an infrastructure that supports the people that you serve.
Good. That's important to know. I want to ask Jacob, how did you build a collaborative partnership team for your project with your external partners?
Sure. So our project focuses on the potential in the Central Appalachia region for working together. I love the previous conversation about working across lines. Not only do we work across county lines, but we're working across state lines as well in Kentucky, Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. And the reason is because we've identified that some of these rural counties, some of them have a capability to upcycle plastics or upcycle landfill destined materials like wooden pallets or old dilapidated buildings or tires or metals. And then other counties maybe right next door have no infrastructure at all, but maybe a lot of supply. And so how can we connect these dots together and have everything work in harmony with each other to where it's a good service for the community and the public. It's a good business driver to connect that local supply chain, and it's a good opportunity for folks to learn new trades and skill sets in these maker type environments. And so partnerships were a massive component of that. How do we sort of keep that network strong and in cohesion with each other? And so for the purposes through this grant, it helped provide that structure in a way that had 3 different tiers, or like even a target, so to speak. If the middle of your target is your strongest, most closest partnerships, those are the ones that we incorporated with our sub-award agreements through this POWER grant. These are the partners that have the capacity and the personnel, the technical assistance, the resources to be able to commit to the ask that we're giving them to be dedicated, committed partners for these collaborations. And then a tier outside of that would be more so memorandums of understanding, or MOUs, where these partners may have, some capacity, sometimes some resources, but they're not able to dedicate, too much of their bandwidth to this full time, but they're very interested and motivated. And then on the outer rim of that would be like these letters of supports that we're receiving from city council members, different local businesses or governing organizations, educational institutions, entities that are excited about this type of opportunity, but can offer hardly any assistance or resources, but are stating that once we're able to build up this capacity and this network of collaboration, they will be more than happy to be involved in a way that they can more directly plug into our services in a way that is more even and spread out across the region. And so having those opportunities for those different sizes and different scales of organizations to collaborate, I think oftentimes we set an impossible goal that, I want an organization just like mine that's going to do just what I'm doing, and that's what I need. And you're never going to have that. So how do you build a system that allows multiple different types of organizations to come on board and feel like they can participate in the way that they can? It may not be in the way that you want all the way, but it's enough to fill the little gaps here and there to where you're creating this beautiful patchwork quilt of collaboration throughout the region. So having that structure through our POWER application really helps to solidify the levels of commitments and the levels of collaboration that we had.
Thank you so much. And I have a question, just when I hear both of you talk about your partners. This question is for both of you. How do you keep your partners in the loop from the start to the finish of your projects? I'll go with Ashley first.
First things first, you got to build that rapport. Relationship is key. And, I always think it's good to set up targets and timelines of when you're going to be reaching out to them so that you're following through on different aspects of the projects. So I would say coordinating those regular meetings. I think that another part to that is obviously finding other ways to disseminate information. Sometimes we can't always get together, but use your email, use social media, whatever you have to your advantage, use that to keep folks in the loop. One of the things that we do to keep our infrastructure strong with CORE is we have a regional advisory council, and that's an opportunity to bring all of our partners together to learn about the work that's going on with CORE, but to also share information that's going on in the community. And so we have those quarterly, and that's really our targeted approach to sort of keep everyone on track and aware of things that are just going on with CORE and in the community.
Thank you. Jacob, do you want to share how you guys keep people in the loop?
Absolutely. So before we even applied for a POWER grant, we identified the need for what we call one source of truth. Now, when you're working across multiple states, different versions of different activities can be interpreted in different ways, and there could be the potential for a lot of chaos. And so we had applied for a technical assistance grant through ARC before pursuing a POWER grant to develop a strategic region-wide plan to look at the market analysis, the business analysis, the logistics, the whole myriad of what we were trying to pursue. How do we get that codified and laid out in a roadmap to where we're all able to look at this one document and agree that, okay, this is the one source of truth that we're all operating from. This is what we all point back to if there's any confusion or if there's any question on the direction that we're going. So that was incredibly helpful to have that as just the anchor for all that information to live in. And then that moved us forward together as, of course, COVID stopped the whole world from meeting in person. That was really challenging for us, but in that challenge, it created an even more effective way of collaborating because we thought, okay, all these states have to meet up in one central location, and that's difficult, and the logistics are challenging in Appalachia. And so we've just been hosting all of our monthly meetings just virtually, and that has enabled us to have such a much broader reach and engage so many more participants than we would have before that may not have been able to send a representative down on a work day to learn about something that they didn't know much about. And so it really, again, democratizes that ability to participate and keeps that consistency going every month. So that documentation alongside the virtual connectivity has really helped us to stay in tune and on time in a real manner.
Thank you. Thank you. And I have a question for both of you guys. What lessons have you learned about partnership engagement and coordination? I know we kind of started talking about that. Is there a final word you'd like to leave us in that regard? You want to start, Ashley?
I will just say that's your sweet spot. Like, if you can find great partners to work with, that will leverage additional opportunities within the community to not only be able to advance their work, but to advance the work that you're doing within your project. That is the lifeline of a successful project.
Thank you. Jacob?
Yeah, I would agree with Ashley as well. Just having those conversations, the relationship building first, to where you have that understanding that I like the term that was used earlier, just the flexibility too, because the time period of application to actually receiving the funds, so much can change in between then. So you need to have that relationship and trust to where you're able to pivot if needed, and shift responsibilities or move different assets or resources here or there to be able to face the challenges. As I mentioned before with COVID, that really challenged us to move certain things in certain areas to where we would be more prepared to face the challenges of the current era. So those trust and relationship building exercises were paramount.
Great. Jeff, I saw you shake your head. Is there something you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, when we talk about partnerships and relationships, all of the things we did in our POWER grant were things that we don't do here at Hatfield-McCoy. We reach out to Southern West Virginia Community College for training. We reach out to partners in community capital, Natural Capital Investment Fund for lending. Our grant would not have been possible without partners. It was none of our skill sets here. So those partners are just critical. And listening to these two talk, you have to have partners. And we shouldn't try to be all things to all people. We need those partners with those expertise.
Yeah. Well, we've had a pretty rich conversation so far, and there's another person that's with us today, and I wanted to talk with Steve real quick. Steve, when we start talking about strategies for success, what are some strategies or tips that you can share that you've learned through launching your POWER project? Can you unmute?
Okay, all right. Strategies to success. It's interesting that following this up with partnerships, because I think that is one of the critical keys to strategies for success is partnerships. And actually, most of my thoughts, what I'm thinking about lately is our partnerships. We've had a lot of issues with them. But I would say strategies to success overall. It's important to assess the degree to which your project has culture change in it. Our project, for instance, we're doing volunteer trail maintenance in the Monongahela National Forest, and we're using volunteers so that it's sustainable. We want to build the local capacity. It's in working with a variety of partners on it. And this is we've had two technical assistance grants and one POWER grant for a parallel project. Anyway, we've been working with partners on and off now for, I guess, about 5 years. And what I've learned is that it's really important to be strategic in selecting partners. I think just having more partners is not necessarily better. It's more good partners that matters. And then how do we make those kind of decisions? And it's really a factor of looking at a couple of things. One is, how aligned are they with our project goals? And how aligned are we with their project goals? And then what are the true capabilities? I know that it's like dating. You first meet the partners and, oh, it's great, and they're just wonderful and so professional and all this. What's the true capabilities? And it takes some time to understand that. And so that's would be sort of the second thing. And then the third thing is shared values. You know, are our values shared, or are they actually in conflict? And what we found out is that the three things that are most important to us are professionalism, communication, and how organized the work is. We don't need a lot of chaos. There's naturally chaos in any kind of, you know, partnerships and systems, but we want to minimize that. And then how much overlap is there between our shared values and their shared values? I'll give you an extreme example. In our case, our basic value is stewardship. We're taking care of the land under the assumption if we take care of the land will take care of us, that sort of thing. An opposite value would be extractive industry thinking. And of course, that's a lot of that in West Virginia. That's where the money originally came from. And so those are different value systems. And then how do can you work with that or not? I would say. And then the I guess there's warning signs that we've learned. A lot of our learning, most of our learning is trial and error, it seems like. And warning signs would be things like, we've named these, I like to name things. And one of them is called King of a One-Horse Town. And that's an organization, usually a small one, that they tend to always be, my phrase for it is, they're always whipping the buggy toward their agenda. Regardless of what we're doing, they're pushing in that direction. And then the second warning sign would be waiting to work until the money shows up. And that is there's a lot of people that are they're fairly wealthy. They've got a lot of influence, and they're waiting for the resources to come in, and then now they're interested. And what we found is if we ask them to do stuff early on, like help write a section of a grant proposal, they won't do it. So that would be a confirmation of that problem. And then the third thing is just poor communication, just plain old returning emails, returning phone calls. We've had an incredible problem with it. Had a guidance counselor that we have to go through the guidance counselor to school to get access to the high school kids for volunteers. 6 phone calls and emails, no returns. That's what we're running into. The third thing is, I call it master of the backroom deal. Is this partner have a tendency towards setting up a sort of side deal or backroom deal, and they want to pick the committee that oversees everything. They want to handpick that with their people, with their friends. And then the last one is I call it I think you work. People they generate a lot of ideas. They usually entail a lot of work being done to implement those ideas, but they don't want to be responsible for implementing any of it. So those are the kind of warning signs that we've learned. That if we see these things, then our radar gets turned on and we start looking at it more closely. And I guess the last thing is that we've learned that time will change our perception of our partners. It's a living, breathing, fluid thing, a partnership, and there's things that we can do to make it better. So, for instance, one of our partners is the Forest Service, National Forest Service, and we're following a principle we call make their problem our top priority. So if they've got a problem with something, especially if it's something that's been passed down to them from a higher level, we will make that our top priority, and that works wonders in dealing with them. And then the last principle there is we want to underpromise and overdeliver. There's nothing worse than creating big expectations and not delivering on. And I guess then the last point is that if our project, which it does, or if your projects involve culture change, that is changing the way people think about doing things and the way people feel about them, that's supported by the community and the culture, then we want to think big but act small and go slow. Because otherwise you create a lot of resistance against what you're trying to do, and then you're fighting that resistance rather than working with a partnership.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot on that. And no doubt that each of our projects at some point in time do have challenges. And the good news is our ability and our willingness to work through those. And I want to ask Ray, just can you share with us some particular challenges that you've encountered that kind of push your timeline back, and how were you able to overcome that?
Sure. And again, building on a lot of what's already been said, but we were kind of going down a new path with this downtown redevelopment support and activity. And so we had to take the time to truly lay out the constructs and not just jump into that the minute we got the grant award, but take that first period of time to assure that our partnerships were aligned, that we had the constructs in place to be able to truly and comfortably and meaningfully address the challenges that we were trying to reach the communities, to reach the folks who are actually active in these downtown project redevelopment. And so that's the recommendation, is take your time to truly get aligned. A lot of the constructs that the team has talked about, make sure your partnerships are on the same page and that you're kind of pointing the same direction, and then bring together the communications, reach out, follow up with folks. What we were trying to do is elevate local challenges to a regional, statewide, and even a multi-state kind of scope, so that downtown redevelopment can be an activity that is recognized as having potential solutions and strength in a broader scope than just one town trying to move one building. We're trying to bring that to the attention. And so the Central Appalachian Network, the Appalachian Funders Network, our own statewide network, it's just been truly, all of those have been supported by the POWER funded activity that we got. And it really was meaningful. Those partnerships that Jacob and Ashley spoke of, bringing people to the table and making sure we're going the same direction, can't be understated to the impact that can have.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'm going to ask this to everybody, starting with Ashley. What are the first steps that you would advise a new grantee in order to take to have a successful launch of their project?
I'm going to be very practical on this one. Reread that proposal and look at your timeline. Like, for us, that timeline was the guiding force for everything that we tried to execute. So I'm going to say very practically, keep that proposal that you submitted and that timeline on hand. I literally probably carried that around for the first 3 months of the project until I almost had that thing memorized, to be honest. So just practically, just keep that on hand. That way you don't have to think about what to do. It's already written out what to do. And if you recognize that there are holes in your timeline, like there's going to be a challenge in meeting that timeline, just communicate with ARC and they will work with you. But the thing is, just keep the main thing and use the proposal to your advantage to execute and implement your project.
Yeah, if I'm correct, you inherited a project. You did not write the project. Is that correct?
No, right. That's exactly right, Ralph. I did not write the project. And so I was hired on to sort of implement the project. So it was almost like pressing the gas and the brake at the same time. And just to, give a shout out to my team, I had a wonderful team who came under me and a great leadership team that supported seeing core be implemented. And so you just have to recognize also the strength of your team, the strength of the people around you and what assets they bring to the table, what skill sets they have, and relinquish control of what you can relinquish control of.
Well, thank you. Thank you. How about you, Jeff?
I'd say, strategies for success for us, filling a program manager's position is something we never envisioned would take that long. It took nearly 9 months. And I wish we would reach out to some of our other ARC Power partners, because it ended up being our Power partners that helped us find a great program manager. You've got to stick to the grant, and you've got to keep ARC informed. And I think that absolute open line of communication with your program manager at ARC is critical, because it's hard in a quarterly report to explain, hey, we're 9 months into this and we don't have anybody in charge yet. But if you're having, emails and calls, you've got to keep an open line of communication with ARC and reach out to other folks that have power grants, because it's surprising how helpful they're willing to be to make your grant successful, because we talk to other grantees a lot and they were a great resource along with ARC. So I would say, follow that grant, but don't be afraid to ask for help, and make sure that you're keeping ARC informed at every step of the way.
Thank you. Thank you. How about you, Ray?
Yeah, those first steps, getting things launched. As I mentioned, we had a terrific partner, and a little bit similar to Ashley. I was brought into the Brownfield office to help implement this grant and be the on the ground presence to support it. And I cannot overstate that they built into me, and that we work together. And I really love Jacob's one source of truth. I hadn't really thought of it in that exact phrasing, but that was such a key element early on in our project, to assure that we were going to go the same direction, that we had a really good understanding of who our target was and what kind of outcomes we were after. And Ashley mentioned the timeline, and so I had to get myself familiar with our timeline and bring that into my world and make it my reality. So as I mentioned, the upfront investment in assuring that we have a good understanding of where we're going and who we're going to impact. And Jeff mentioned engaging with ARC. The representative truly worked with us as we had to adjust how things were really playing out in reality on the streets and in these downtowns. So bring your flexibility, bring the preparedness, and get on that page with the one source of truth. I love that statement.
Yeah, thank you. Stephen, is there anything you'd like to add?
I would say listen to your users or customers, however you think about it. We've learned so much, and we talk to them almost every week. Whether it's on Facebook or in person, or we do surveys, but we're constantly trying to understand their experience, so that we can, because our job in trail maintenance is to make it a good experience. People come to West Virginia because it's beautiful, it's not crowded, and I'm talking about for trail-based recreation and other things as well. But we want to put ourselves in their shoes, in their biking shoes or in their hiking boots, whatever it is. We want to understand that experience, and then once we understand it, we want to make more. We want to do things that make more of that engender that experience. So I would say being very close to your end user / customer is a key. And I'm sure Jeff, talks to the ATV riders and does similar things like that. But we live by that, and we've learned so much about what they want, and then we try to create it.
Well, that's very important. Jacob, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
Sure. So our project now has over 50 partners in the Central Appalachia region. But when it first started, we started with maybe 5. And so I think having that technical assistance first off was really important for us to know how to actually even know if power was the right tool for what we were doing.
Let me interrupt you, and can you share with them the process that you guys did? And I forgot to ask, other than I'm aware of Jacob, did anybody else have a TA grant? I think, Stephen, you had a TA grant to start out, right? Is that right?
We've had 2 TA grants and 1 implementation grant.
Okay. And go ahead, Jacob. I'm sorry.
Sure. No, you're absolutely. It's a great distinction to make. And I think that's what lent itself to the success of our project so far, is that, we had a vision for what could happen in the region. for upcycling and reuse and job training and logistics. But how do we take that vision and supersede it into the form of a power grant opportunity? And so that's a massive leap to go from 5 just organic conversations with different organizations throughout multiple states to this institutionalized system that has multiple functions and partners and movements and funding sources. And so to fill that gap, it was really important for us. Obviously we want to jump straight to that big implementation part, but it was necessary for us to sort of take our time and pump the brakes a little bit and see, okay, we do need this one source of truth. We do need this strategy plan for the region. We need to do our homework to figure out what does the form for the mold of how this fund is going to fit in here and function in a way that just isn't disparate and just flailing and everyone's just sort of doing their own thing. We need guidance, we need guardrails for this. And so having that technical assistance provided the foundation necessary to start building the rest of what we were doing with the actual power funding. So that made sense for us because this was a very new concept in the region. There was no really market that we could mimic, that we could look at and say, okay, well, let's do it this way. So having some of that clarity built out beforehand was really important for us.
Well, that's very important. And I know that Jeff, you've been in the trail business for some time. And is there anything that you would like to share in terms of, I'm going to give you one more chance to talk about the success and to talk about anything you would like to leave with our potential. We've got a lot of folks online who are listening today and wanting to step their toes in the water. And is there any last words you would like to leave with them about this whole process?
Absolutely. Engage your partners early. Do not try to recreate something that already exists out in the marketplace. Find folks that have expertise in those areas and lean on them. And right now there's so many grants in West Virginia. There's a lot of talent that's being gobbled up. Look for consultants, look for partners. It's going to be really hard to run out and find a hugely talented team and hire them all right off the street. You're going to end up taking someone else's employees. So I would really, really push our folks to find partners that are already doing that activity. I think it will make your grant roll out more quickly. And I think you'll be more successful. So we don't need to try to be all things to all people. And I think POWER really provides us an opportunity to build those partnerships and to work with other organizations that really have some expertise in what we're doing.
Right. Ashley, I see you shaking your head. Is there something you want to add to that?
I just echo what Jeff said. I think he put it precisely as it needed to be said. It's just that POWER is such a great opportunity to create partnerships within the community. And really, it's about the goal of creating impact within your project and within your community.
Well, thank you. So we only have a couple of minutes here, and I'm going to do my best I took a couple of notes and I want some confirmation here. I think that we all recognize the flexibility of POWER and its critical value to the redevelopment opportunities in West Virginia on the external piece. And internally, I've heard some strong things spoken of the ARC team in DC and their capacity to work with everyone and to provide you with guidance. Internally, I'm hearing some things like the one truth. I like that. That's very unique. And the other piece that I hear very across everyone is the level of partnerships and the level of commitment of your partnerships are very critical to the outcome of your project. And in order to make that effective, communicate. And when you're not sure, communicate. I thank you so much for being with us today. If there's anything you'd like to leave with us before Stephanie comes in, I'll leave it open to you for one more time.
I'll just add one thing that I thought about when we were talking, and that is benchmarking. We haven't talked about that. We did a lot of benchmarking with other trail systems around the country, specifically Pisgah National Forest down in Asheville and Volunteers Outdoor Colorado. the two big ones, but we learned a lot by talking to the best in class.
Okay.
Ralph,
Yeah.
I'd share one thing. If you don't know whom your partners can be, the West Virginia Community Development Hub knows all the folks that are getting grants. They know all the service providers in the state. You guys are a great resource to reach out to help you find a partner. And the coaching services you guys provide are just awesome. It really helped us navigate our grant as a first-time Power grantee.
Thank you. Well, I want to thank all of our panelists today for offering some insight. And I'm going to turn it over to Stephanie. Thank you, Stephanie.
Great. Thank you, Ralph. Thanks, everyone, for being on the panel this morning. And thanks, Jeff, for the shout out about our coaching services. The Hub does offer coaching for current Power grantees, as well as the coaching that I mentioned earlier for applicants. So those are two different coaching services that we offer. We're going to move ahead with the premiere of our first Power Talk documentary short, which features stories, impacts, and advice from the team at Grow Ohio Valley, based in Wheeling, West Virginia. And after that video, we'll come back for our second panel.
Danny Swan, and I'm Executive Director of Grow Ohio Valley. We're at the Big Wheeling Agrarian Center, which is a project of Grow Ohio Valley, on the border of Ohio and Marshall counties, just outside of Wheeling. Grow Ohio Valley is a nonprofit organization that focuses on building a local food system in the Wheeling area. It includes two major spheres of activity. We work to make farming and food making economically viable, and we work on public health issues, mostly in the urban core, downtown Wheeling. In 2014, I think we started with 4 people, kind of none of us really being paid. And now we're an organization with 52 people on payroll with a variety of initiatives all over town, pretty public initiatives. One of the biggest ones is the Public Market, which was an ARC Power funded initiative, a year-round nonprofit grocery store, farmers market, and cafe that focuses on 2 missions. 1, creating a sales outlet for local farmers, and 2, resolving a food desert in downtown Wheeling. In other words, making healthy food available in the downtown Wheeling area.
Grow Ohio Valley started the public market really to introduce customers and more of the community to the farms that feed them, and to really give farmers this place where they can sell all year round and not just really have to rely on farmers markets in the summertime. We're smaller, first of all. We have a more personalized touch. So we have a team of people who are fairly knowledgeable about the product, the farms. So we're able to work with the customer one-on-one. So that's where our size really does matter. Product that is unique and local.
Boy, the Appalachian Regional Commission does something really well, which is connect its recipients of grants to each other and then to other funding opportunities. Getting a Power grant was definitely like one of the key memorable watershed moments in Grow Ohio Valley's history. Lent us a note of credibility and seriousness with local political leadership, and then connected us into this broader statewide community of Power grant recipients that the Hub is championing this summit around. Set aside a month to apply for it, a big one. Unless you love staying up all night, it's onerous, and there's some difficult parts of the application. 2, reach out to the Hub as soon as possible if you're considering applying, and start compiling the information that you're gonna need. A great example is that for a Power grant, you're gonna have to prove that your region is coal impacted, and to what degree coal economy exiting the community has created the need for this Power grant. So that's when you could get a head start on. You could start to find the arguments, find the citations, find the resources, make some connections with economists. They're gonna help you write that section really well and score highly on that part of the application. It's critical. You can't get a Power grant unless you can prove that your region is coal impacted, and to what degree. Sustainability post-funding is always a thing that funders want to know about. It's a good question. In the case of the public market, we produced a revenue-producing enterprise with that Power funding. Try to get your startup capital as debt-free as you can with these social enterprises. I think that's a really good way to think about grant funding. So then you don't have debt service on things like the public market or, big social enterprises that you're building.
We have done a couple of different things. The variety of product that we have, I think, makes us a demand for the community. We have done personalized shopping. We have a membership program. They're able to shop our wholesale cases and be able to pay the wholesale price. That's really increased our membership base. So we were able to really find some benefit there. It's really just about the team and how they educate and how they can work with the customer one-on-one. That's where we do our greatest sales. I would say that the impact of these projects, the public market, Grow Ohio Valley, the different projects that we do, the impact is great. And there is help and resources out there to support anybody who has an idea to make their community better.
The Power Grant initiative is interesting to me specifically because it's about systemic economic change. Why is it the case that our soup kitchens are so full of people and our homeless shelters are overflowing? And we have an opioid epidemic. What's going on there? That's what the Appalachian Regional Commission's Power Grant initiative is focused on, trying to resolve this need for economic well-being.
Well, I think I speak for a few people in the comments here about how inspiring the work of Grow Ohio Valley is, and just generally the work that is happening in Wheeling. It's just one example of so many transformational projects that are happening throughout West Virginia with power support funding, but also with incredible leaders on the ground putting their visions into reality. So we're going to talk some more about that kind of stuff in our second panel, which is called Moving from Incubation to Acceleration, Building Sustainability from Power Funds. We all know that in order to be competitive for power funding, we have to know our sustainability strategy from the start. So we're excited to hear from our speakers today about their strategies for building sustainability, how to address project challenges proactively, and tips for financial management for power grants. So I'd like to welcome our speakers for panel 2 to the stage now and invite them to turn on their videos. We have with us today Marjorie Cook, the Director of Marketing and Communications with Advantage Valley, Jean Colson, CEO of the National Consortium for Entrepreneurship Education, Joseph Howard, CEO of West Virginia Forest Products Cooperative Incorporated. Hey, Judy Moore, Director of the West Virginia Hive Network, and Derek Scarborough, Business Development Lead and Deputy Director of the Robert C. Byrd Institute of Technology at Marshall University. And finally, our moderator for this panel is Monica Miller, a Hub Power grantee coach and retired director of the State Main Street program, who spent 20 years in the West Virginia Development Office before founding her own firm in Miller Development Services. So I'll turn it over to you, Monica.
All right. Thank you, Stephanie. And good morning, everybody. It's great to be here again. I always love this event, hearing everybody's wonderful stories and challenges and how you've pivoted and been able to work through some of these things. We all know that this is long-term work that we're doing and to make true change for West Virginia. And sustainability of that long-term work is critical. So this panel will talk a little bit, the panelists in this group are going to talk a little bit about some of those challenges that they've had, especially after the last couple years, with some pivots and closeouts, and these are some early grantees. So let's go. And Jean, I'm going to start with you. You know, we're thinking we've moved past the launch stage of our project's up and running. What are some examples of challenges that you have run into in the middle of your project, and how did you solve them?
Well, we're currently in the middle of our second power grant. Our first one was charged with getting more and more entrepreneurship education into the K-12 system. And in order to do that, we got a lot of the right partners, as we heard from some of the other speakers. We partnered with community colleges, and we established a system that was multi-state in its scope. And the first 3 years, it went really well. We met all of our metrics, and we were really pleased with the way it worked. So when that grant finished, we applied for a second one in some different areas. And as soon as we got it, we were back into the motion of everything, and things were looking really good. And then you may have heard about this thing called pandemic that kind of hit the not only the schools, but also our community college partners. And before long, our model, which involved going to schools and going to community colleges and delivering face-to-face training to teachers, was just sort of dead in the water. But what we realized is we had to go where they were. And they were all online. They were all virtual. And so we did two things. We took our face-to-face training and converted it to an online product. And last summer, delivered it to several hundred teachers online. And that was something new for us. We weren't doing an awful lot online previous to that, but we had some really talented people working with us that helped us do that. So we did that. And we also did sort of the same thing with our community college partners. We took some of our products and turned them into virtual products. I will also say that what held us in good stead through this pivot was that we already set up a monthly phone call with all of our partners on Mondays and with all of our community college partners on Tuesdays. And so as we began to find out what are schools doing in Eastern Kentucky or Tennessee, we had a good handle on how things were happening and whether they thought they're going to be back in school soon or not. The communication was just critical. So what we found out is if your customers are going in a different direction, you just have to go where they're going. And we are kind of still there, keeping our fingers crossed that schools will soon get back to some normal footing. They're all back in school now for the most part, but things are not the same within buildings and systems yet. So that was our pivot as we went from a face-to-face model to a virtual model.
Great. Thank you, Gene. So Derek, now I'm going to move to you. How have you had to pivot your project? And how did you identify that a pivot needed to happen? And then what was your process to follow through? How did you involve ARC? And at what point did you involve them?
Sure. We had to do, so our project was the Appalachian Hatchery, which completed in July of this year with a 1-year extension. Certainly the pandemic made us pivot some of our services as well. The main one being the supply chain expos we did with our partners at Advantage Valley. These are where we teamed up with a large company in the region, assessed their needs for services and goods, and mapped out opportunities for small businesses to be potential suppliers for them. So we used to do those sort of in person, kind of traditional speed dating kind of formats, but we moved it to a virtual setting and it actually worked better. We got to build out a good rhythm and routine and schedule to host all these meetings virtually between that big prime company and all the smaller potential suppliers. So it really worked better for everyone involved, and certainly overcame the restrictions that many corporations had with travel and face-to-face visits. So it helped facilitate all that. In general, though, my advice to any POWER recipient is, early on in your process of working through your grant and implementation, you're going to have to make an assessment in year one, certainly, of where you are with your budget, how you're progressing with your spending. Are you on track? Are you on track with your metrics? And you're going to have to start thinking about whether or not you're going to be able to meet your goals and spend your dollars the right way. And you're going to have to make a judgment call about whether or not you think you're going to need an extension. And I don't know the statistics, but I would say probably half of grantees go through that extension request and probably get it. But, some factors that impact that, certainly, everybody's travel budget probably changed or didn't get used during COVID because there's less business travel, right? Other things that impact probably every grant are, hiring. You may have budgeted for a position to start at the beginning, but maybe it took you 3 months to fill it. Well, how are you planning out and stretching out those payroll dollars? And then the same thing is if you have any staff who leave and you've got gaps in a position during hiring times. So, those are just things to consider and be thoughtful and plan forward. However, I don't think ARC or any agency wants you to request an extension just because you're not spending your budget as planned. They want to see how it's connected to your goals and your project's metrics, and you've got to make a case for how that extension would improve your delivering on what you set forth to do.
Although I do think they've been very good the past 2 years to work with grantees I think I hear from all of the projects that you've had really good luck working with ARC to make those pivots, and they've been very supportive and understanding. So thanks, Derek. And so Judy, all three of you, Jean, Derek, and Judy, you all have a little different organizational structures, and your programs and projects have been a little bit different. So Judy, we'd like to hear from you a little bit about some of your challenges and pivots, because you've certainly had them also. How'd you solve them, and what did you have to do?
Absolutely. Thanks first for having me today. It's always great to be a part of this group, and so I'm really happy to be here. We do not currently have a Hive, a POWER project, but the Hive was created out of a POWER project in 2016. And so we also are a partner on a POWER project, the Creating Communities of Healing project currently. But so the biggest challenge that I had, Monica, was that, like a lot of others I've heard this morning, I stepped into my position at the Hive about a year into the grant. And so talking about building the plane and flying it at the same time, there was a lot of that going on. But through a lot of support and nurturing from ARC, and specifically the program managers and our wonderful partners that we had, we came out on top at the end of the grant. It was a very successful program. We're celebrating our five years of being around this year, and we're incredibly proud of that and thankful to ARC for all that they did to actually start the Hive. We look at them as birthing us, our parent, and they truly gave us that support along the way. I do want to say I've heard from so many people today how important partnership network is. And if it wasn't for our partners, we truly would not be what we are today. We were founded as a partnership network, and we continue that today. And everyone on this panel we've certainly worked with in one way or another, and so many others that I've seen. As far as adaptations and pivoting, I think because POWER projects are meant to be transformational, that's something that we constantly go through. I mean, we have to always be testing our services and what we're doing and making them better. And so adapting and pivoting is something that we truly are used to doing. And I think that benefited all of us highly whenever we got hit so drastically with COVID. I know some, like Jean was talking about, had some real severe challenges. The biggest challenge, that we had was that we were basically providing most of our services in person. And we learned through COVID that that's not really absolutely necessary for everything that we do, that we can do a lot of our work virtually. And by doing things virtually, it actually opened doors for us. We can choose from speakers statewide, nationwide, instead of interrupting someone's day to travel to Beckley to be with us to offer a workshop, or our clients that are small business owners that really have limited time in their day because they're already working 24 hours to keep the business going. It's easier for them to jump on a Zoom and do one-on-one business advising and all of the cohort-based training, and I could go on and on. But so we have truly pivoted everything to basically virtual, but we're still adapting as we come out of the pandemic and looking at hybrid models. But we've learned a lot. And I think the big thing here is to be flexible, know that you have to adapt, and just kind of be open to that opportunity.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So the next question is the next series of questions are more about project closeout and the sustainability word that we keep hearing and talking about this morning. So Joe, I'm going to ask you first, how are you preparing for the sustainability of your project beyond when the power project ends? What successions do you have for potential applicants, and suggestions do you have for potential applicants and new grantees about thinking about starting their projects and their project sustainability? Because the old thing, begin with the end in mind. So how are you preparing for sustainability, and what advice do you have? And you're on mute, Joe. Oh, there you go. There you go. We got you
thank
now.
you. Well, the West Virginia Forest Product Center received an ARC Power Grant in 2017. We started October 1, 2017, and we closed out our power grant in 2020, January of 2020. So we were able to maintain what we're doing. I won't say it has been easy, but we have been able to do it. So when you look at sustainability, it generally means finding a way to use your resources in a manner that prevents their depletion. And for charitable nonprofits, the phrase sustainability is commonly used to describe something that you're able to sustain to complete its mission over the long haul. If you think about it, though, sustainability is not just financial sustainability. It must also include a leadership succession planning, and also your strategic plan, which will change as you evolve through. So you think about some things that a new applicant would want to know is, first of all, everyone has pretty much that has an ARC Power Grant has a meaningful mission and a vision. So that's going to allow you to have a strategic plan on how you're going to manage your budget throughout that. That will change. I'll just tell you right now, that will change. But to weather these storms, these changes that occur, you need to stay focused on your employees, but also on your stakeholder experiences, and make sure that you look at diversified funding sources, as well as keep your financials strong. All of this with a growth mindset. And I would tell you, stay true to your purpose, stay true to your mission. You can pivot your financials a little bit. You can pivot how you're organization runs, but if you don't want to pivot your mission, you took this money from ARC to do a specific thing, and you need to stay true and grounded in that life's purpose and mission. Your vision and your values are the foundation of all of those that you're privileged to lead and those who you also serve. You also, as everyone had mentioned, you need to leverage your local solutions and partners. To be sustainable, it's not, you have to achieve the greatest impact with lasting change. So we empower and invest in our local solutions. We have people that we work with, local businesses, and we tap on local expertise, and we engender buy-in from our communities as well. Our goal as an entity is to put ourselves out of business. We want to develop the forest products industry such that value-added forest products such that we're no longer needed, that it's self-sustaining, that we've created a network that depends on each other and not someone that's external. So that's our goal. We hope to go out of business someday. I don't see that happening in the next 10 years, but it's possible. So, and as I mentioned, you really need to have a leadership succession plan. You have to have a strong leadership succession plan. So we are doing that now. We're training people. I would like to step away sometime soon, but we're not ready for that yet, but we are working towards that. And yet that has to be at all levels of your organization as well, not just the leader, the actual top. And then the talent is critical that you do. We're a very high-tech organization. We do some things that no one else is really doing in West Virginia. We have some machinery that's not necessarily other people would have. And so we're moving in that direction. So to get the talent to operate these has been challenging, but it also is part of your sustainability model as well. And then you think about, well, now back to the financials, how do I fund my organization? I'd say once you received that day one, when you receive that first check from ARC that gets deposited in your account, you start preparing additional grant proposals. We were a little lax in that, but boy, I'm writing 4 right now. So I think that it is very essential that you do that. We're fortunate as we train people and work with people that we develop products as well. And we've pivoted into some different directions. I thought we would be doing fine furniture and niche markets in that. That's not moved as quickly as I want. So we've moved into more building products. So we're able to supply one of the few people who can supply black locust decking, which lasts forever without pressure treatment. So it's pretty cool. And we do thermally modified wood. We're supplying that. And we're moving in the direction that we teach people, and we're going to teach other primary processors in the state about these products, and they may choose to enter that as well. And then the other thing I think you should always do is charitable contributions. You should solicit, because we are 501c3 and there's people who are interested in what we do, that you should solicit them. And so with that, I'll stop for a second.
Okay, great. Thank you. Well, Marjorie, part of sustainability is building a project that has effective partnerships, as we've heard, for the long term. What examples can you give of long-term relationship building with partners, and why did they matter?
Thanks, Monica. And first, let me thank the ARC and POWER for grant funding for Advantage Valley through a program called Faster West Virginia, and thank the Hub for today's event. Advantage Valley has been involved in multiple POWER grants. The Faster West Virginia grant, we are in year 2 of 3 of a $1.4 million project, and it's a program to boost entrepreneurial startups and expansions in our region. And we will likely need an extension because the rollout of our grant happened at the exact time as the rollout of COVID. But anyway, that's just to tell you where we are in our project. But with regard to effective partnerships, every POWER grant has a different variety of number of partnerships and how wide a geographic region they spread across the state or beyond, as in many people's cases. For the Faster West Virginia grant, our grant covered 8 counties, and we had 4 major partners. And I'd like to really give a shout out to Terrell Ellis, the executive director, for establishing at the outset, as was mentioned in the last session, the importance of regular communication. Specifically, what we did was a monthly steering committee meeting, as many others have done, and virtual opportunities made that easier and more time efficient. Specifically establishing really clear roles and responsibilities for all partners at the outset. Our 4 partners, key partners, were the West Virginia SBDC, Unlimited Future in Huntington, West Virginia, Bridge Valley Community and Technical College, and Wyoming County Economic Development Authority. So we had to work with those 4. And at the outset, I say that specifically establishing clear roles and responsibilities, I encourage all to consider memorandums of understanding with your partners such that you have something to go back to reference what you agreed upon. And I think Mary Hunt mentioned in the chat, evaluating the question, what is in it for me, so that each partner can really feel like they are a part of the program and know what they can get out of it. And no, it's just, I guess it's a process of trust building, but having that document to go back to has been a good thing for us. As we have to pivot, we look back to see, well, wait, what did we say in the beginning, and how can we, work within that, work within those lines. And then specifically, again, the monthly steering committee meetings worked well for not only this Faster West Virginia grant, but Derek, also with the hatchery work that we did. We established the monthly meetings back then for that grant, and then for this power grant that has continued. And again, I think for effective partnerships, establishing a solid timeline. I think Ashley Shaw referenced that as well, but looking at the big picture and trying at the outset to envision how your services and program will roll out. It's just a guide. Things change. We have to be flexible. But I think in our case, at least our executive director helped set just put the guardrails up for a good timeline to be able to follow. So building long-term sustainability, I think those kinds of things, thinking about partnerships, are key. I'd like to follow on with a little bit about what Joe mentioned. Sometimes sustainability for how our programs can continue to make a difference after the funding is no longer. Sometimes we build capacity financially, but sometimes we also have products that outlive our grant life. For example, with what we are doing, we not only have added to a revolving loan fund that Christy Laxton manages in Wyoming County. The Benedum Foundation and ARC helped provide a basis for a $500,000 loan fund. But since that time, we have added multiple donations to that loan fund to enable us to offer more loans ongoing. We also have, throughout the process of the Faster West Virginia program, we've offered 14 different webinars in 6 different sectors. So we have kind of an archive of valuable resources and contacts and opportunities available for entrepreneurship in our region and in these 6 sectors. So those webinars live on, and that's a form of sustainable work. We can continue to use those and share those. And we also have built a number of new partnerships through our childcare entrepreneurship work. We have worked with West Virginia Forward and WVU and their MBA students, and we have created childcare startup guides for the Advantage Valley region. And it seems that those guides have taken on not just a very helpful life within Advantage Valley, but it looks like they will be taken statewide. So again, we have some materials that can continue to move and provide benefit to the region and to the state beyond what we hope is beyond the timeline of our grant program. So those are some thoughts on relationships and the importance of partnerships, as well as some thoughts on sustainability.
Excellent. Thank you, Marjorie. So Joe, I'm going to circle back to you for just a couple strategies. If you could just quickly share a couple strategies about how to successfully close out a project. Since you're closed out.
Yes, start early. We waited a little too late. We should have closed in October of 2019, and we closed in January of 20. So we're about 5 months. We asked for a small extension just to be putting our documentation together. Your final report's important, and that's lets ARC know the value of their investment in your group. So it's very important that you work and detail that as best you can. But the closeout starts at the beginning. You need to document everything you're doing, every contact you make, everybody that contacts you. If you get all those documented, then it's real easy at the end to do it. And if you wait and try to remember, you're not going to. So you make sure that all your purchases are done according to the federal guidelines, and make sure that of course you have your financial audits and everything with that. But I do say that it's important to begin early and to make sure that you're thorough in how you're closing out your grant.
Excellent. Thank you. That's very, very good advice. So moving on to question number 3 is about financial management and audit preparation. So Derek and Judy, Derek, I'm going to ask you first, if you could talk a little bit about financial management of a POWER grant. I mean, as I said before, you guys are both in very different organizational structures. So you'll have different answers, I'm sure. But talk a little bit about the financial management of a POWER grant. It's a serious amount of work. What strategies did you find helped you effectively manage all the financial elements of your project, including subawardees and procurement processes? And then, Derek, could you specifically touch a little bit on program income? We talked a little bit about that the other day, and I think you had some good advice for that. And there you are. You've moved on the screen, on my screen. So there you are.
Okay, I'm still here. Thanks. Sure. So financial management first, and then program income. So,
please,
RCBI is a part of Marshall's Research Corporation, and as such, they're our fiscal agent. So they do the financial reporting for us. Obviously, we have to do all the due diligence to properly do invoicing and purchasing requirements, and make sure we live up to the standards on bidding and getting proper quotes for things. But in general, I would recommend early on understanding what kind of communication rhythm your program officer wants to have. Are they the kind of person who wants to be updated anytime something happens and get peppered with questions, and maybe they're on top of it and can respond back? Maybe they prefer for you to wait until things rise to a certain level before engaging with them, because let's face it, they're all very busy people these days, and especially with more grant money coming down through various budget processes. ARC and other federal agencies are busier administering more grants. So got to think about that. And don't just think about your ARC officer. Many of you often also team up with other organizations for match or additional funding, private foundations like Benedum, and maybe other agencies come into play. So think about all them and how you're going to communicate with everyone. Generally speaking, I think a good thing to do is always share every report with everyone involved in the project, regardless of whether or not they have different reporting schedules and windows. Do that. You just want to have a preponderance of information and backup with your financials, and your implementation goals too. So that you've always got more than enough information to answer questions and provide backup should you ever go through an audit or something like that. Fortunately, I haven't had to do that with this. We have been through a Department of Labor audit on a different grant, and having all that makes it a lot easier. So to switch gears, you need to think about program income. And what's that? So many of our projects involve some kind of fees or revenue that you're generating through your work. If you're not, it's going to be hard to build out that sustainability that everybody wants you to have. But as you collect money in association with maybe people going through a training course, or maybe people, hiring your staff to do prototype work like RCBI does, or using equipment that you have like us and Joe Howard has, you've got to document that and set up a special account for income generated off of the activity of your grant. And you need to understand what are the guidelines for that. Different agencies have different rules. I suspect POWER has changed, and I'm not even up to date on what the current rules are for the new POWER awards. But you need to understand that, because you've got to think about it. You got to have a plan for when your grant's done, what you're going to do with that program income. And you've got to have that mapped out before the end of your grant, certainly. And sometimes grants require you to spend the dollars you raise in income back on the activities of that grant and have a detailed plan. Others will allow you to spell out additional activities you're going to take after your grant, but it's still got to be usually tied to your project and can help build out that sustainability you're supposed to be working towards. So figure that stuff out at the beginning so you're not caught by surprise.
Good advice. Very good advice. So Judy, how about you in your organizational structure? What kind of strategies have helped you manage all the financial elements?
So the first thing that I would say is financial management is very serious and take it as such, right? Take the time to put the proper procedures into place up front. Don't try to do them after the fact. I think it was Joe that said, you might think you'll remember, but you won't. There'll be a lot that will go on during the course of your grant. And so just get that foundation in place. I was very, very fortunate, as Derek is there with Marshall. My previous grant experience came from being at WVU. And so I was very in touch with, dotting the I's, crossing the T's, because the last thing you wanted was to get in trouble with the Office of Sponsored Programs. And so that really helped me personally a lot. But if you don't have that type of opportunity and coming into a POWER grant or any other grant, truthfully, you really do need to seek out a good understanding of financial management before you start moving through the process. Again, ARC has they have a grant management notebook, which I mean, honestly, you should read it and read it again, because it's got great information in there that will really, really give you a good foundation. The other thing that I will say about financial management is that I am right now going through the ARC financial management course that is offered through the Appalachian Nonprofit Resource Center program. And I highly recommend it. It has really been an eye-opening experience for me, and I've managed grants for years and years. It's just really, really good. So if you get the opportunity, I would say take it.
Great. Thank you. So Jean, the audit. You've been through one. What was, and we're getting ready to run short on time. We've got just a few more minutes. So what was the most challenging part of preparing for your audit? And was there something you thought that would take a short amount of time, but maybe actually took longer? Just real, in just a couple minutes, tell us a little bit about your audit process. You're on mute.
I just knew that was going to happen. We received a notice from the ARC and that we were going to have an audit of our ARC grant, our power grant. And in the letter, it said when it was going to be and who was coming. And here's a list of things you need to have to prepare. And even though that list was fairly extensive for somebody who had not done an audit like that before, it did give me a guideline about things that I needed to gather. And we had some communications back and forth about documents that we just didn't have. And so on the day that the gentleman arrived, I work at home, in my home office in my basement. And he wanted to come to my office and work for a week. So what we did is we set him up with an office at my accountant's office. They had a very nice little place where he could work. And the advantage to that is he had ready access to my accountant. So a lot of the questions he had went to the accountant rather than to me. So he was down the street at the accountant's office. I went over there every day for 4 or 5 days and sat with him and answered questions. And it was not as painful as I thought it would be. It turned out to be pretty straightforward. And we turned out okay. We had one little tiny finding about a policy we didn't have. So our board passed that policy right away and we are in good shape. So you may get that call or that letter, but I would say just allot some time for it, but don't be afraid of it. It was not as difficult or as painful as I thought it would be. But one of the things that I know now that we had done that helped me with that was in the beginning, before we wrote the power grant, we said, what are our strengths and what strengths do we need to go out and get? And we hired this accounting firm just because we didn't have a real strong accounting system. And we also had a grant partner that was really good with grant management and making sure we took care of the money and that sort of thing. And we did that from the beginning. So just make sure that if somebody calls you and says, be ready for an audit next week, you've got people around you who have been paying attention to that all along.
Excellent advice. Thank you. So as our final question, Derek, you mentioned a little bit about the relationship building with your ARC program officer. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to Judy and give her a chance to weigh in because we've only got like a minute left. So Judy, if you could share with us a little bit about how you view your relationship with your ARC program officer and why does it matter and what advice do you have for that?
Yes. So I think that we often forget that our program managers want to see us succeed. And so they are there to help us every step of the way. We also have a tendency to, hold back and not tell them the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And that is the biggest mistake that you'll make because they know what is going on internally with ARC. There may be some policy changes. There may be, you may have heard that yes, you can have changes in your budget line items and you just go on down the road, with that change in mind. And then you find out because of some kind of a policy or procedure that they've adopted, they're not doing that right now, or there are some specifics to how they will agree to that. So I would say don't assume anything. Always be totally honest hit any kind of issues that you have head on. That's the only way you can fix anything. Just see them as a partner moving your project forward.
Great, thank you. Well, I see that Stephanie has rejoined us, so that means our time is up. And I just would like to very quickly summarize some really key words that we've heard: virtual, virtual, virtual. There are a lot of things we can do as virtual, and partners, and get used to pivoting. And then I neglected at the beginning to give a shout out to Federal Co-Chair Manchin. It's great to see her in this role. She was a huge supporter of Main Street when she was First Lady here in West Virginia. And so it's great to see her in this role again. Thanks to all you panelists. Thanks to everybody. Stephanie, next.
Thank you, Monica.
Thanks, Monica. And thank you, Jean, Judy, Derek, Marjorie, and Joe. That was great. That financial management and the audit preparation is the thing that's always in the back of our mind. So Judy, I know people had some questions about that course that you mentioned. We'll try to share that resource in the chat. So we're going to do another poll on this session as well. And while you're doing that poll, we're going to premiere our second Power Talk documentary short. And this documentary is featuring stories, impacts, and advice from teams at Fruits of Labor and Region 4 Planning and Development Council based out of Central and Southern West Virginia.
Tammy Jordan, I'm president of Fruits of Labor. We are at Montgomery, West Virginia. This is our second expansion location. So Fruits of Labor is a social enterprise. We work with adults in recovery, and we also work with youth as they are progressing towards maturity, and young adults as an addiction prevention program. So we have a culinary and agricultural training program that's nationally certified through the American Culinary Federation, and we're able to bring people in and do education, training, certification, and employment. We started 20 years ago as an agricultural company and grew to offer catering and floral design and wedding cakes. 12 years ago now, I was visiting a lady in Alderson Prison and just saw the need for hope within the opportunity of people when they were exiting the prison system. We were very encouraged by what we had available and the opportunities. And so from that point on, I spent about 3 years in the planning process. And for the last 9 years, we have been educating and employing individuals in recovery and youth that are at risk. Region 4 is an amazing part. They actually are the recipient of the ARC grant. They have been a long-standing supporter of Fruits of Labor for years, and we have looked for ways to partner together, and this opportunity unfolded.
What we bring to the table more than anything is for people like Tammy that are extreme visionaries, understand that the needs are there and have this vision of fixing the problem. However, if they have to spend a lot of time going through, I'm just going to say minutia, that the federal government puts before you when you're trying to get their money, it takes away from that visionary process. The PDCs take that off her plate and can work in the background through the whole project and make sure that all the bases are covered fiscally, then that applicant doesn't have to worry about that. The positive impact of POWER has been immense since the program began. Boots on the ground type initiatives that are there to help people on the ground in areas that are very depressed. It is targeted towards coal-impacted communities. POWER has been a huge injection of positivity to those communities.
It is so amazing to be able to see how that impact is going to carry out. It's vital to be able to truly understand what metrics you can produce from the POWER grant, be very clear in that. And then when those are accomplished, we see that additional opportunities continue to unfold of that. So every time a student is successful, we see that they are re-engaged within community. There's employment, there's opportunity for advancement. It gives confidence and trust is rebuilt. And so we see that that is happening not only as they are engaging within learning culinary or agriculture, but we see it being engaged around the table at their homes.
The healing that I've experienced here, I take that out and put it into the community, to the girls that I meet, to let people know there's hope. And then the success that I take away from here, you know, I have my own car that I pay for. I have a house that I rent out. All those things were never, ever possible when I was in drug addiction. Now that I'm the successful member of society, little by little, we grow and become that and make our communities better and heal those communities.
Make sure that you have clarity of vision, to have a very specific plan. Those plans, how you get from point A to point B, may not be a direct line, and it may not be exactly how you envision it when you write the grant, but be willing to accept responsibility for getting your entire team there.
It's again that wonderful commitment to networking and to be able to have those great partners that step in and say, hey, come and look at this in our community.
I love that video. It really shows what transformative vision and leadership can accomplish. And I highly recommend stopping into one of the Fruits of Labor cafes. I stop in the one in Reno whenever I can. Not only is their services great, but their food is delicious too. So thank you to Tammy and John for participating in that video. And we're going to move into our final panel for the day, which John himself is on. So this panel is called Planning a Successful Power Application. Our goal at the Hub is to support as many competitive West Virginia power applications as possible. We have seen that by working together to build strong collaborative projects, we can position the state to draw down millions of dollars from ARC each year for community economic development strategies. So, like I said before, it's time once again to begin planning for the annual power application cycle. And as you heard from Danny in the earlier video, it takes some time to do that. That's why we're already starting to talk about it in November. So you're going to hear from our speakers in our last panel who have a wide range of expertise on putting together a strong power application. And I know this is going to be an informative discussion for all of us as we look to next year. So I'd like to welcome the speakers for this panel to the stage. And we have with us today Krista Cox, the Appalachian Regional Commission Specialist with the West Virginia Community Advancement and Development Office, a division of the West Virginia Department of Economic Development. That's a mouthful, Krista. Hi, good morning. Mary Hunt, Program Director for Community and Economic Development with the Claude Worthington Benedum Foundation. Braden Horowitz, Power Program Coordinator at ARC. Sarah Riley, Executive Director of the High Rocks Education Corporation from beautiful Pocahontas County, as she said earlier in the chat. Natalie Roper, who's the former Executive Director and remaining Broadband Coordinator at Generation West Virginia. Victoria Stansberry, the Blueprint Community Coordinator with Lewis County Commission, and John Tuggle, Executive Director of West Virginia's Region 4 Planning and Development Council. And finally, our moderator to manage this large, robust conversation is Katie Loudon, the Hub's Director of Strategic Development. So good luck, Katie, and I will turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Stephanie. It's a real pleasure to be on this call with what feels like friends, partners, people doing the good work together. So I'm just thrilled to be able to spend the time with you all today, and very much thank you on behalf of the Hub for saying yes to this request for the largest panel ever assembled. We're a little bit like the Avengers. So just a note to everyone, this is really the nuts and bolts panel. So we're going to get into the weeds here as we talk about putting together a strong proposal into next year. So to kick us off, the first question I have is, really about the process of putting together what a strong proposal looks like. So what's some of the back end work as you started to move forward toward the proposal process? How did you start the application process? When do you need to start planning? When did you start planning? When did you find out that your project was progressing towards an award, right? There's a process, and we're going to talk about that. What engagement did you have with agency staff during project development? So don't forget, we've got our ARC partners here with us. They are a wonderful resource. Use them. And then as agency staff, what's your role in supporting potential applicants? So we're going to hear from Krista and Braden about that. And then as part of that, Mary's here from the Benetton Foundation. We need to talk about match. So that's part of putting together a competitive proposal. And so really, I just want to give folks time to really dig in here and talk about the process of putting together the proposal. So I'd like to start with Braden. If you could sort of give everyone an idea of the timeline and the structure of the proposal itself, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Katie. So the timeline is currently still a little up in the air due to congressional funding, but we are hoping that it is similar to the years past. But in any case, as Stephanie mentioned just a second ago, now is the time to start working on organizing your team, organizing kind of your application materials and everything that goes with it. So if you have an idea, now is the time to start. And we don't really anticipate any major changes from last year's RFP. Things should stay pretty consistent. So that is a good place to start. Our investment goals and priorities are not changing from the past couple of years. So if you can, go find that RFP, and it's a really good place to start. As for the actual application process, the first step that we recommend is reach out to your state program manager, in this case, Krista Cox. They're a great resource, and they can really work with you more directly through the entire application process. One thing to note there is if you are having one of those multi-state applications that we do like to see, reach out to all the state program managers involved, and their contact information are on our website. So reach out to them sooner rather than later, and they can help you in any way that they can. So once you have your team and general project idea together, we're going to ask you to submit like a very quick one-page letter of intent. This is a very basic fillable PDF form with just some basic information of contact information, proposal title, how much you're thinking about seeking, and a very broad overview of your work plan. We kind of look at this and basically review it for eligibility. If there are any big red flags, we'll just ask a quick question, but for the most part, we're checking for eligibility. And with that, we'll set you up in the POWER application portal with an application. There, we recommend that you log on sooner rather than later and get familiar with the application. We made sure it tracks as much as possible with the RFP and the questions there and the rubric that you'll be responding to, but just get a feel for it. It's better to not stress out in the last week or so trying to put that application together. So go through the application, make sure you submit as early as possible, answer all your questions, make sure all your documents are there, uploaded and tagged appropriately. Once you submit, you'll go through the application will go through a review process. It takes a few months. It will be reviewed by multiple people, and you should get an update sometime over the summer of whether you've been recommended to move forward to the next stage of review and get assigned to a project coordinator, ARC, or we'll let you know that unfortunately you weren't successful, and we'll give you the opportunity to request feedback from the reviewers and use that to strengthen your application down the line.
Great, thanks so much, Braden. I'd like to turn it over now to someone who is a recent recipient of an ARC POWER grant. So she's fresh off of this lift of getting this proposal out the door. So I'd like to turn it over to Sarah Riley. Go ahead and talk about your project in the context of like putting the proposal together so that we're all sort of grounded in what you're doing and how that process went.
Yeah, I'm happy to. We're a first-time Power grantee, and we're really excited about the project that's happening. I was thinking one like tiny tip I wish somebody told me is that your concept paper, the LOI, I was just laughing when Braden was talking about that. You can't change your name. So that's never happened to me before with an LOI. The LOI I submitted was for the market fail, power skills, and the social enterprise mindset. And then we were like filling out a proposal and advancing, and everybody was talking about ARC funding the market fail, which was a terrible plan. So they worked with us to get that together. We now call that project the West Virginia Jobs Network, and we're really, really excited about it. So the core of the project is about something that, you know, I had seen and experienced for a long time. It was something that I had thought about and wrestled with for like 10 years and like kept saying in conversations, man, if we only had this thing, like it would be so much easier. The High Rocks, we work with young people. Our target age is between 12 and 29. So we really work all along the pathway from the first moments of adulthood to being established as a leader in your career and in your community. And it's a focused target because life is not a straight path, but and we're also an employer and a pretty big AmeriCorps program. And so we experience these two things at the same time, which are so resonant across the state. One is that young people, they don't believe that there's opportunity for them here in West Virginia, and it's really hard for them to find it. And every employer that I know, including me, struggles really hard to build a competitive applicant pool. And so this dream of like, oh, we could put together a network or like have some sort of like headhunter thing that could connect these two things, because this shouldn't be happening in West Virginia, is really the basis for the network. And so in terms of coming into Power, I felt like Power was a thing that was beyond our reach for a long time. And we were able in the last cycle to come in, we were invited to come in as a partner. And so for those of you that are existing Power grantees, I just want to emphasize how valuable it is for those of us that haven't been part of it before to be able to come in on a partner on a grant. So Sprouting Froms brought us in with a youth lens and a curriculum transformational education lens on an existing Power grant for growing capacity. And by participating in that grant, it really helped us understand what successful Power projects look like and how to run partnerships that are that big and that complicated. So we really learned by our partners that we were working with in that project that had done it for a lot longer than us. And then when the ship came around, said, okay, I think we're ready. I think we can do this. I did reach out to Krista. Krista was amazingly important, but it was also really, really incredibly helpful to work with the organizations that have had Power grants before. And all of them were so generous and so helpful and could give me all the unofficial behind the scenes answers about like the true reality, which was just incredibly, incredibly important. So it took us, you know, we really leaned into thinking about what the roles were, what we wanted to do. We wrote that application collaboratively. Somebody's got to be in charge. And so I took lead on ours to really make sure it was together and really clean. But we spent months meeting every week, talking through goals and timelines and where we wanted to get to and what it would look like. And I'm so excited to have it now. And I'm so excited to be talking about it with all of you. And I can't wait to invite you to the West Virginia Jobs Network. And we never could have figured out the match if we hadn't been able to reach out to Benedum and they hadn't been incredibly supportive. That match is a really high bar for people that are coming to that sort of level of, you know, it was probably like 5 years ago that we were like, okay, West Virginia doesn't get our share of federal money. Like, can we get better at that as an organization and like be part of the solution of leveraging that? But we weren't at a point where we could have done that without Benedum and where we could have done it without the network of partnership of the ARC Power community, which to me like used to feel like as an outsider, like an in club that I like couldn't figure out how to get in, but I saw lots of cool people in there doing stuff and talking about stuff, and I like, you know, had moments to connect around different things, and it that wasn't true. My perception was wrong. I just needed to reach out more directly to those partners in those projects. So reach out to me.
Great. I'd like to turn it to Krista and Krista, I would really love for you to talk about the state ARC office role as people reach out to you, of what kind of guidance they need or are they most often seeking, and how does that process work as it interacts at the state level?
Sure. As Braden mentioned, one of the requirements in the POWER RFP is for each applicant to reach out to the state where the project will be done, just to make sure that their project aligns with the state economic development plan and state strategy. But aside from that, we can offer technical assistance, and we can help applicants get through the application itself. We can help applicants with, specific project questions, where as it relates to, as well, West Virginia state strategies. And then we can also link people to other groups and organizations that can provide technical assistance. And I think here in West Virginia, we have a great group of people that provide technical assistance and assistance of any kind to potential POWER applicants.
Great. I want to move now to Victoria. Victoria from Lewis County, we've already heard from her today a little bit, but as another new grantee in this process, I would love to hear about your experience through the process and what were maybe what were the things that were like question marks, I guess, as you went through the process, as you're discovering along your journey. Yeah, please just walk us through the application process for you.
I think some of the biggest question marks for me and for our project was just, how is this all going to come together? We had people that we wanted to reach out as partners, different stakeholders, and just kind of synthesizing in our own minds what meaningful engagement from them looked like, and then how it strengthened our project as a whole. So fitting all of these pieces together and making sure that they fit for our project, but also that they fit into what I've kind of talked about this before, but what ARC and the state was trying to do. And so as we went through that, there was just a lot of circling back, what is the main thing here that we're trying to accomplish, and why is what we're proposing as our project going to help us accomplish that? And so just getting our minds wrapped around that, and our hearts were wrapped around it, and we were really excited. So we had to find a way to transfer that into where it looked practical, where it looked achievable, and where it looked like we really had thought about it. And that this was the appropriate step for us for the project. And again, I've talked about this before. The documents that ARC puts out are so helpful. Read those, reread those, and I just used it as a checklist. And anytime I felt lost in the process or stressed in the process, I would just kind of go back to that grounding document for me. And then even reaching out to Krista was very helpful to have them there. That was one of the first things I did, because I read the document. And that's one of the first things I said you should do. And then Braden also mentioned it. So really the path is there to follow as you think about what you're trying to achieve as an organization, what would be important to you. And as you work your way through it, a path will, I don't want to say illuminate itself, but almost feels like it does as you start to reach out to your partners and work through the application process. It really feels like all of your work begins to coalesce.
Great. So in putting together the application, right, like we discussed previously how in order to do the application, right, you have to have all the components together. So you have to have the financials together. You have to have the partners assembled and committed. You have to have the narrative has to be strong. And then one critical piece of this is match. So I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Mary. If you want to talk about how Benham has played a role in the match and how you see several partners that you've worked with through the POWER process, how assembling the match on a competitive proposal, how that's been and what that process has looked like.
Sure, Katie, thank you. And thanks to everybody for being on this. This is so exciting being in this year of of power when so much opportunity is opening up. So this is really exciting. Yes, the Benedum Foundation has been active in providing match to the power program since the very beginning. And just I guess I'll go through some of the technical things. Match providers are equals. They're not sort of supporting cast necessarily, although we are complementary. So when you approach your match providers, including Benedum, it has to be consistent with what the funding priorities are. So if you're looking at philanthropy or other private funding like banks or CDFIs, or in some cases, counties or municipalities, their funding priorities, it's not just, can you provide money to match this? It's funding priority that should match the goal of that project. And I say that in our case at the Benedum Foundation, we have a wide range of funding priorities, and that's why we seem to be fairly suited for matching. So my area is community and economic development. Our priorities are entrepreneurship. We've heard things about that today, tech-based economic development, and rural economic development, which has kind of a broad umbrella of things like tourism. We look at those activities in rural development that use indigenous assets, which are, we call it people, place, and purpose. And the outdoor recreation trails, heritage downtowns, brownfields, agriculture-related activities, and all the proposals that you've heard today have similar, those kinds of things have matched, and those are the things that we've matched relative to these projects. Also, we have the POWER program funds workforce development. We have a program in our education program area that is workforce and education, work with community colleges a lot and job preparation. So we would look at projects that for in-demand or emerging industries, tech training, environment, tourism, advanced manufacturing. That's some of the roles that we've participated with match funding as well, which are consistent with our priorities. And also we have a health and human services. And so health as an economic driver relative to an industry, healthcare is an industry. And we've heard everything from childcare and daycare and elder care and things of that nature, which represents business opportunities, and social enterprises also represent an aspect of healthcare delivery that the Benedum Foundation was matched, as well as other funders. And so recently, Philanthropy West Virginia has assembled many of the other funders in the state to look at being match sources for POWER and other federal funding. And so I would encourage folks to engage with Philanthropy West Virginia to assess which one of those, or which of the smaller funders, but localized funders maybe, and other private funders in the state that may be interested in providing matching funds for projects that are consistent with their priorities. So the other thing I would say, match is this tough thing to deal with. I mean, we do, the beautiful thing about ARC POWER is in-kind match counts. And I think, Braden will probably want to talk about this a little bit later too, but identifying what true in-kind is, tracking that, and being able to build that into your project budget really enhances the ability to leverage those POWER funding. And I encourage you to think about how in-kind sort of works in your particular project. So I guess those were the key elements. The other thing I would like to mention too is that, municipalities and county governments also have resources as well as the state. And so we encourage people to look at and engage those entities, their public entities, as partners, because in the event there are either in-kind or cash support that can be provided either through existing state programs, for example, or which is non-federal funding that could be used and pledged as match, but you have to start early. And I'm going to go back to that same story that everybody has said, start early, because funders are on their own cycles. Funders need full applications. Match funders need full applications as well. So we need to make sure that we're starting early and treating the match providers as we treat the POWER provider, the ARC, with the same type of requirements that they may have, meeting their requirements.
Right. Start early is always the best advice. Natalie, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to you so you can talk a little bit about the broadband match that you've provided, and you can talk about that process and what that's looked like.
Awesome, thanks. Yeah, so I'm really representing our perspective through the locally driven broadband solutions initiative, which is a partnership between Generation West Virginia and the Benedum Foundation. And we've been working with folks like John and Sarah around the state to make sure that communities have the support that they need to secure all of this new exciting federal funding available for broadband. And POWER is one of those great opportunities. And we supported a few projects, 3 projects this past round that got funded for broadband construction projects through ARC POWER. So broadband projects are big, especially if they're construction. So fiber is expensive. And that means that the match requirement is also high. So I wanted to just share a little bit about what we found in terms of how to solve that high match challenge for construction projects, specifically to broadband. One thing that we've seen to be effective is remembering that ARC can serve as non-federal match, meaning that you can leverage other federal resources. So one of our broadband projects was supported by ARC and is in the process of getting funded through EDA. So that's one way. If you have a really large scale match requirement, is think about how to get creative with other federal sources. And that's a huge opportunity that's unique to ARC. So that's one tool that we've seen to be really successful and important for these large scale projects. The other that is specific to broadband that a few of our projects used this past cycle was using an in-kind match from, or requesting a cash match from the internet service provider. So all of these grant projects are going to have a provider who is responding to an RFP saying that they'll actually build and operate the fiber construction. And a few of our projects leverage match by including a percentage of cash match that the provider will commit to including in their construction costs. So if you're not thinking about a broadband project, that might all seem like a whole lot of technical details. But if you are, both of those have been really effective solutions to overcome what can feel like an overwhelming amount of match money to come up with.
Great. Thank you so much, Natalie. And I just did want to point to Mary's comment in the chat that ARC is unique because it is non-federal to other federal sources. So that's a little bit about what Natalie's talking about when you put together these large scale proposals. Great. Awesome. Okay, I'd like to move us to the second question. The first question, to be fair, but there were like 5 questions in question 1. So we're moving to the second question. And this is the what I wish I had known question. So what are some of the most typical mistakes that you see applicants making for those on the receiving end of the applications? What resources do you know that are out there to support applicants? And we've touched on those a little bit. Use your program officers for help. And then what supports did you use for those who have recently applied, and what supports do you wish you had? So I'd like to start with John, who we haven't heard from yet. John, I would love for you to talk a little bit about the procurement process and the role that Region 4 has played in the POWER proposal process.
Okay. Thank you, Katie. And we appreciate being here and being with this team that's here. I mean, we've worked with all these people on the screen. It's been awesome. Many times the visionaries and the talented people that get into this type of application don't really understand that there's a lot of federal strings attached to some of the things that go on. And therefore, a lot of times we come in and people look at us sort of like we're a wet blanket because we make them do things they don't really like to do. It's not things that are fun, and it's not the easy part of getting through
the process, but the federal government requires, fair and equal treatment of people that get federal dollars, and therefore we come in to help out with that. And a lot of times people don't realize that that's pretty extensive. When you hire your professionals, when you hire contractors, vendors, so forth, so on, you have to go through process of advertising and do it correctly. And what happens is a number of times the mistakes made is people will hook up with somebody during their partnership gathering situation, and they end up partnering with somebody they really want to work for them. And that makes it a little difficult because they didn't procure them properly. So they'll end up having to back up and do some proper procurement as per federal regulations. And that's where the PDCs can come in, because we do that all the time. We work on that type of regulations that keep people from getting in trouble with the funding agency, and basically them coming back and saying, well, you can't really pay for that because you didn't properly procure those people. And we're saying, yeah, well, come on. They say, sorry, it's right here in the reg, can't let you do it. So you have to be careful with those type things, and be prepared when you go into one of these power grants, if you're not experienced with it, to ask around and get with the right people. That's been talked about all day. Hook up with the right people. But the PDCs, Planning and Development Councils, there's 11 of them in West Virginia. We're in Southeast West Virginia, 5 counties. Most of them have 4, 5, 6 counties, but they can be very helpful in assisting people with those type of criteria that goes along with the power grant. The one other thing I'll mention that's a little bit of sometimes we run into is when they do set up their metrics for these things, is matching up the revenue stream with what you can actually report in the end properly for the federal government. A lot of times when you're thinking about a revenue stream, you're just think the money comes in and we do our thing with it, and we put it on a piece of paper and turn it into the ARC, and they say, okay. Well, a lot of times, on your reporting process, that needs to match up when you're doing your application. You need to understand that and give the ARC something to look at that makes sense, methodology on how that's going to work out. And that makes your application super strong if you can show where your revenue stream is going to match up with what your deliverables and what you're trying to accomplish in the end, and really make it a sustainable initiative in that way. So that's one of the things I would say is key to looking at in these applications up front, is some of those type things. As far as ongoing support from PDCs, we provide a lot of technical support when in the realm of regulation and compliance with agencies. You're going to run into bats and crawdads and things like that you have to protect. And if you have any type of construction or that type of thing, and a lot of people don't realize that can be a huge issue. You can only do certain things certain times a year, and you can only cut trees so big around at certain times a year, and so forth and so on. So they need to be aware of some of those type regulations when it comes to environmental compliance. And those are things that we really come to the table and make it fiscally safe for applicants. We try to keep them to where when they get that audit a year afterwards, that they're not in prison orange. That's the main thing. We try to make it safe for them, and we can do a good job with that. We do help coordinate meetings a lot of times for people. And what the other huge thing I think we bring to the table is the people that are visioning and trying to accomplish something really wonderful. They need to focus on what they're trying to accomplish and not on trying to deal with the federal government. And so we can do that on the back, in the backstage, behind us. We can help out a good bit with that, where we take care of them physically and they can do the thinking of how they really want to help people out there we can help them relax. They don't have to worry about, getting smacked around by somebody at the federal government that doesn't like some form they didn't fill out correctly. We try to help them out there. So that's what we bring to the table.
Thanks so much, John. Let your PDC help you cut through the red tape. That is great advice. Wonderful. Next, Natalie, I'd like to turn it over to you. Some of the challenges, some of the barriers in putting together some of these strong broadband proposals.
Yeah, so we started this initiative, we, Generation and Benedum, we started talking about this in 2019. We launched in 2020 because we were seeing that there, I don't know if you remember what else happened in March 2020, but COVID pandemic only increased our need for broadband and increased the amount of federal funding that's available for broadband. But even before that, we were seeing that huge opportunity, and grant funding is such a valuable resource to be able to really make the ROI work for these communities with smaller populations, for providers to be able to come in and build infrastructure on and underserved areas. So we were noticing how hard it is for communities to get proposals in on, again, this complex issue. If you're not immersed in broadband, it can feel completely overwhelming to know where to start. And that's really one of the main reasons we started this initiative, was to really be able to serve as capacity support to local communities. We work directly with regional planning and development councils, supporting their efforts in doing this, and working with communities and identifying projects, which federal funding source makes sense for them. And then we do whatever it takes to make sure that they get that grant application in across the finish line by the deadline. So we're really here to offer any support that you need. That's looked like us overcoming barriers of just, oh my gosh, where do I start? We're happy to be a first call. In addition to your regional planning and development council, if you reach out to us, our first suggestion will be to connect you with your regional planning and development council and try to understand, what other broadband projects are happening in the works, connecting you with the state. We have an amazing resource, and Kelly Workman and the state are doing so much work on this and helping us identify through their great data, where are your and underserved areas in your community? And are there other projects? Are there providers that would be interested in partnering with you? We're really here to help be a process navigator through all of it. And doing that with the really specific broadband technical lens that is needed for these projects. So I think just like all the other advice, start early is right. I think connect with us, connect with your planning development council. We're able to, thanks to Benedum's support, offer grant writing services at no cost to you. We have a relationship with an engineering firm that's able to really help pull together a lot of the analysis that's needed for a strong broadband proposal. We've helped collect letters of support to really help make the case. Again, when you're seeking broadband funding through the federal government, we're really making the case for why broadband is important for economic development. So this isn't just, fund construction because we need it. We're here to help really make that case to whatever funding stream that you're applying for. So yeah, one takeaway, we'll do whatever you need and help get you to the next step wherever you are and connect you to all the many amazing players that are already in this broadband ecosystem and just connect those dots. So yeah, does that answer your question, Katie?
Yes, thank you so much, Natalie. I realize we have a lot of listeners on the phone, so your email box may be fairly full in the next week or two as people understand.
My day. Reach out.
That's great. That's great. I'd like to turn it over now to Krista. it's really important, the support letters as people get together an application, a strong proposal. Can you speak to a little bit about the support letters and mistakes that people may make as they put those together, request them, and then put them together? I would love for you to speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, sure. I think that the one thing that I will say, when people are first putting together their application, they need to think about painting a complete picture of the project they're going to do. And a lot of times that's where the support letters comes in. People will collect and get support letters from the community, but then their partners, they won't have partner engagement letters. So they need to have both support letters, community support letters, partner engagement letters, and then also match commitment letters. ARC will look for to make sure that the partners are involved in the project and engaged. And then they're going to look for a type of match commitment. Another area that I wanted to mention was the budget and the budget narrative. And just to make sure that you have a clear, detailed picture in your budget narrative of your budget and the expenses. Just kind of make sure that you explain your project. That's all that the reviewer is going to see, is what you include in your project. So just make sure that it's complete.
Great. I think you hit on something really important, and this is something that we had talked about previously, was just the idea that your budget narrative and your budget and your narrative all need to match, right?
Yeah.
Like it would not be a good idea to put something in your budget that you don't speak to at all in the narrative of your proposal. So just to make sure that as shifts to the project happen and the development, that all of those documents sort of stay up to date through that process. Yeah. Thank you so much. I think that's really important. Braden, I'd like to turn it to you. What are some of the most typical mistakes that you see applicants making as a reviewer and someone who gets a lot of questions? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, definitely. And a few things that I'll cover, we've mentioned today already, but I think they're important to highlight. And most of this comes from reading the reviewer's notes and comments on the back end after they're all submitted. I go through most all the applications in the notes that reviewers put in there. But the big one up front, it seems straightforward, but please answer all the questions directly. These are really substantial documents, these applications. So the more scattered that your information is throughout the document, the harder it is for reviewers to review it. And we've made a concerted effort to make sure that the application questions that you're responding to aligns with the rubric. So they'll be working through it question by question by question. And this also gets to a point that Krista made just a second ago, was make sure that your supporting documents are there and they're consistent with your application. First up, partnerships. We want to make sure that the partnerships and your partners are engaged, committed, and they are fully aware of their role. Reviewers can kind of sniff out when a reviewer kind of submits a half-hearted engagement letter and nowhere else in the application is there any description of their roles and responsibilities in the project. And for match, Mary mentioned the in-kind match portion. For the match letters, make sure that lines with what you're listing in the financial section of your application. And especially if it's in-kind, make sure that whoever is providing those in-kind services or time, they outline how that match dollar amount was calculated in that letter. That's very helpful for the reviewers to see that, to make sure that all those things were kind of calculated ahead of time and not just thrown in there haphazardly. Next, and generally, just make sure you put your proposal in the appropriate context. There's a lot of projects out there, and sometimes they bump up against into each other. So essentially, why this, why now, and why'd you select this particular geography? Power projects, we really like them to be regional in scale, so that's definitely multi-county and even multi-state. Reviewers will look and try to understand how distributed the impacts that you list are. And this is especially key in multi-state projects. I see a lot of times reviewers will kind of list like, okay, you included this state in your proposal, but like, we don't really see the impacts there. Why was this included? So make sure to really break down and explain how your entire geography will kind of be served and impacted by your proposal. I think that's really key. And again, just to reiterate, everyone, just like make sure everything is complete, organized, and presented in a manner that makes it easy to track what exactly you are doing for the reviewers. If they struggle at the onset to really understand exactly what activities you're doing, it makes the rest of the review that much harder.
Yes, couldn't agree more. I actually want to ask Mary if you had any thoughts sort of relating to what Braden just spoke to about making sure, that everything's in place, ready to be reviewed. Did you have any thoughts you want to share from your perspective about that?
Yes, and I think that there's a couple of ways that you can address this. Sometimes it's engaging some cold readers to look at your narratives, which I think is, if you have enough time to do that, so that people that are cold readers should be able to understand what your project is. I think one of the questions is what's the best form of advice that we can give, and one is make your case in about the first 30 words of your narrative. Use the same terminology that is in that case throughout the proposal, so that you can make those linkages to, how you're intending to address your issue, workforce development, a downtown redevelopment, but in some ways refer to that throughout the proposal, so that as you read each section, as Braden was talking about, it starts to make sense to a reviewer as you keep going through that. And again, the other thing is, don't presume that a reviewer is going to be able to hop over onto websites and hop over onto other places. Be inclusive in your narrative. This is a little bit like in the weeds, but you don't want to say, see attached this, or do a hot link to a website that it makes a reviewer. Reviewers are looking at dozens of projects. Even your match providers are looking at 10, 12 projects at a time in a very compressed time period. So we need to see a very smoothly written proposal. And the best way to do that is don't make people hop around to other sources. So don't put see attached, figure out better ways to say it, fit it in the space that's provided. And if you do have opportunities to provide attachments that are relevant, put that in the appropriate place in the application. And I guess the last thing I would say is back to match. Don't get discouraged if a match provider like us says, well, I have to have a board meeting, or I have to have some, we have tried to work with ARC over time on what can suffice as the intent to provide or apply for match over the course of the application process. So you don't want to feel rejected if we can't provide a commitment right at the very upfront, but we could provide maybe that if it's a conditional approval that happens later in the process. So I would just say, keep the pedal to the metal and keep going with your proposal, and we'll work with how those things get backfilled if you are engaged with a match provider. So those are just a few random thoughts there.
Yeah, I agree. Sometimes it's about, just keeping the train going and holding on, and like just trusting that those things will come together, as they tend to do. I want to turn us to the last question as we're coming up to time. But the last question, I'd like to hear from everyone on this question. What is one sentence of advice for applicants looking to put in proposals next year? So I'd like to get back to our folks with recent experience. So Sarah, do you have one sentence of advice for folks looking to put proposals together?
Do great work that you believe in with partners that you trust, and give yourself permission to keep learning as you go and to ask for help. And good luck.
Awesome. Thank you. Victoria, how about you?
I think some of this has kind of been touched on already, but I'm going to repeat it just because I felt like it helped me so much. But pay attention to the rubric as you start to write, and each time you finish a section, circle back to the sections that are already done and make sure that your new section and the other sections all make sense in light of each other. Really make sure you're connecting those dots all the way through to come out with a really strong kind of seamless project. That'd be my best advice out there, something that really helped me throughout the process.
Wonderful. Follow the rubric. I love it. John, what about you?
Yes, I would say take all that you've heard today and what you've learned today and put it in a form that provides an easy button for the ARC reviewers to look at, and might develop a clear, concise, easily understood application for the reviewer, and bring in an experienced technical team to do that, get that ready that way, is to get the partners in that can do that and end up with that easy button at the end.
Great. We're up on time, but does anyone have a burning one last sentence they'd like to share?
I do.
Okay.
Do it. Apply for these grants. And we have to get, this is so important to West Virginia. The work you're doing is so important to the region. We have just absolutely got to go in there and make this work. And we've done so well so far. We just need to keep applying and getting this money to help our communities in our state. So do it. Thank you.
I agree with Mary. Thank you so much. I'm reminded, I think putting together a power proposal is like that saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. So see the need, believe in yourself, put the players together and just do it. So thank you to all of our panelists. You've been a wealth of information. We really appreciate your time and your expertise today. And I'm going to turn it back over to Stephanie. Thank you so much.
Katie, and thank you so much to Mary, Krista, Braden, Natalie, John, and Sarah. We're closing out here, but I just want to lift up what Sarah said at the beginning of this panel. Power is not a club. Power is a network, and we're here to support you in engaging in that network. And the right first step is coming to this event, and the next step is reaching out to all the resources that are available to help you in your project and in your application. We know that over 70% of today's attendees are not previous Power grantees, so we hope to see more proposals from new applicants next year to keep drawing in those needed federal funds for projects for our state. So the Hub is here to help. I'm here to help. We have coaches that are here to help too. Don't hesitate to reach out to us. All right, so we have one final video that we want to share with you, but before we close out with that video, I'd just like to thank all our speakers and our partners at ARC, at the Benedum Foundation, and at the State Development Office. I want to, of course, thank our event coordination team and the heavy lifting that my colleagues, Emma Pepper and Aaron Sussman, did to help make this event a reality and a success today. And I have to thank extra thanks to our phenomenal communications partner, JJN Multimedia, who made the videos that we saw today and the graphics. So our last video is a Power documentary short that's going to share some advice from current Power grantees. Final reminder, we will have coaching for new applicants next year that will launch in mid-January, and you'll get an email about that. So if you have any questions before then, feel free to reach out to me. I'll put my email in the chat. So I'm going to turn it over to JJN to launch that final video, and thank you all for participating in our event today.
Our advice to groups or coalitions interested in pursuing the POWER money is start early and don't be afraid to aim high. I'd also encourage any grantees or folks connected to the ARC to take advantage of the other programs and trainings that they have available. Friends of the Cheat was able to participate in one of the financial management courses, and that was also really beneficial, and I think provided a lot of confidence building to really go for that, that big money.
I would say first and foremost to know your project inside and out. We have a number of individuals in the county who've been working on broadband for a decade now. When we decided to create the Pocahontas County Broadband Council, we had a ready-made council essentially. And I would also recommend that no matter what type of project you're working on, form a collaborative team to develop the plan and implement it. When entities are reviewing applications for particularly large grants, they can sense the enthusiasm in the application.
Data helps a lot. That early data, that technical assistance was critical in helping us figure out what is the scale and the scope for something like a POWER grant, and can we handle it? Is it something that needs to grow as we grow? So it was a good process to figure out what's the temperature gauge of the landscape of our organization and of this opportunity, to where now that we are the proud owners of a POWER grant, we're not feeling overwhelmed or caught off guard because we haven't done the research or gathered the data. All of that's baked into the process along the way.
Our POWER Award title is Renew All, an investment in heritage, tourism, and entrepreneurship. I've been involved in POWER grants since they started. And so this is my first year as a new organization and was able to secure a POWER Technical Assistance Grant. For people who want to apply for POWER, I would say ask for help. I worked with several different people to help prepare the application.
One of the main aspects for successfully securing some of this funding is that it's all about partnerships. You're going to struggle to be successful across a regional or comprehensive revitalization and economy developing activity if you're just trying to go solo. So draw on those partners that are already successful, are already working in the region, demonstrated capacities for bringing some good talent and strength to whatever the program is you wanted to put forward.
Our project is the West Virginia Jobs Network. I'm the lead on the POWER grant, and this is a dream of mine that I've had for so many years, and I'm so excited to be working with so many partners on it. As a new grantee, I would say make sure that you are applying to do work that you know in your heart really matters, something that you've come up against over and over and over again that is a persistent and pervasive challenge that can't be addressed without this kind of partnership.
One of the most important pieces of advice that I received as a recipient was apply for the planning grant process first. Do a lot of research. Make sure that you're applying for this program so that you can be a part of something greater than just receiving funding for your organization.
Our grant was announced this fall, and it is the Elk River Trails Plan. So we are working with a number of communities along the Elk River Rail and Water Trail to do some planning to maximize the benefit of the trail system. ARC is looking for opportunities where you can really kind of have a scale of a project that's going to have some regional impact to the extent that you can develop partnerships bodes well for these projects and programs that have been funded by POWER.
So I'm working with the POWER project entitled Lewis County Greenways, a feasibility study awarded to the Lewis County Commission. This program brings together people to build thriving communities. As you start to think about your project, think about all of the varied stakeholders and the entire network it could take to get the job done. Think about who might contribute to or benefit from your project. This helped in clarify what we wanted the project deliverables to be, what our goals were. I guess in short, I would say is think early about how you can create a community around your project.